Everybody ready? My name is Paul Blackburn. I'm the mayor of Hood River. I'm going to call the city council meeting to order. Thank you all for coming to your city council meeting. The very first thing we do is we silence our cell phones. The second thing we do is we take a moment as we do our business to remember that folks have been doing business here for centuries before us and that they had much of the land taken from them and that many folks still live here from that heritage, and now our heritage is here, and I don't know what to do about that, and I don't think I can fix it, but I try to remember. Then we're going to say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now we will recess the city council meeting, and I will hand the gavel to Chair Zan Miller to run the urban renewal meeting. This meeting will not take a very long time.
About an hour, probably. Calling to order the Hood River Urban Renewal Agency meeting for December 9th. Jen, do we have Heather or Ben on? Neither are online. Okay. It's cool. Any business from the audience for the Urban Renewal Agency? And anyone online?
Nope.
Okay, seeing none. The first item on the agenda is the consent agenda, which is a single set of minutes.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Yeah. And
I'll second.
all right, Doug made a motion, Megan seconded. Any other comments on that? All in favor of approving the minutes, say yes.
Aye.
And chair votes yes as well, passes. Regular business items and then administrator stuff. Take it away, Will.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair Zan Miller, members of the agency board. One business item in front of you today is a transfer of ownership of 1217 May Street from the Urban Renewal Agency to the city of Hood River. As you may remember, that we acquired this property for the eventual widening of the road to accommodate a roundabout at 12th and 13th. It was acquired from willing sellers, and we took ownership in July of 2024. And we have been working to evaluate options for its care up until it is needed for roadway construction, which is likely several years in the future. So we issued a letter of interest, received responses from two nonprofits. It was delegated to staff to make a recommendation between the two. And we chose Hood River Alliance Church, who is going to use the property on an interim but indefinite basis to house residents or to house participants in their Celebrate Recovery program. And these are folks who could benefit in their journey towards sobriety by having a change of location. So they are going to take on all liability, all maintenance, basically take over all responsibility for the property until it is needed for the roundabout construction, and will leave upon 6 months notice, whenever that is. In consultation with legal counsel, it was advised that it would be best to transfer the property from the agency to the city of Hood River, just because the city has more flexibility to enter into leases with whomever they may wish. And since this use isn't strictly a part of a Heights District goal, that's just a recommendation that following, and that is in your packet tonight to transfer ownership. And then later tonight on the city consent agenda, you have the actual lease agreement with the nonprofit. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
There we go.
So, I mean, when I talked about this before, as I look at the fiscal impact, property costs, insurance, liability to the tenant, which is something we had as a concern before. Are there any other downsides to this approach as you see it?
Yeah, so the reason why we chose this approach is because there would be downsides if we were to rent this for monetary compensation. We'd be essentially a public sector landlord of a single property that is over 100 years old and adequate position or condition, but not great. And that's just not a liability, position of liability we want to be in as like an active landlord earning money off of this property. So by entering into what's called a ground lease or triple net lease, which is very common in commercial real estate, we're able to basically firewall the city and the agency from all liability associated with the property and make all the property's expenses the responsibility of the tenant.
Great, thank you.
Megan?
I know it's very recent, but did you see the letter from one of the neighbors in the packet we got this afternoon? I'm wondering if that's something that we would control or if that's something they would, once the tenant is there, they could work with them.
Yeah, thank you. I did see that as well. And those are, those are the owners of the property right to the west. And we have been in contact with them, and as their letter said, they're in support of this use and these new neighbors. I believe that the house rules that I've seen for includes no smoking. And also that there's no intention to put up any signage. I don't think it will be any problem to amend the lease to add those in there.
All right, seeing no other, we're looking for a motion, which is on whatever page this is, 7.
I move to authorize the urban renewal administrator to sign an intergovernmental agreement with the Hood River Urban Renewal Agency to transfer of ownership of 1217 May Street.
Second?
Motion from Grant and a second from Doug. Any other comments? All in favor, say yes.
Aye.
Any no's? I don't think so. Chair votes yes as well. Job, keep going.
I wanted to give just a status update on the request for qualifications for the broad list of professional services that we issued several months ago. 37 firms applied, which was far more than we were expecting, and many very, very qualified firms. This is to perform duties as ranging from urban renewal administration to economic development, assistance with negotiating development agreements, all the way to engineering, planning, design, all the way to construction management. So kind of the entire spectrum of what we may want to have professional services at our fingertips as project funding comes together or as partnership opportunities present themselves. So of the 37 that have submitted responses, we're going to schedule interviews for 27 of them. Actually just completed 5 of them today. So I just want you to know that, just keep you in the loop and let you know that we do expect to bring contracts back to the Urban Renewal Agency Board in January. Okay. And then today, also just wanted to recognize the Port of Hood River. This is the last meeting where we have Port of Hood River being on the board of the Urban Renewal Agency. So I want to extend my thanks to Commissioner Garrigan, Commissioner Shepard, but also just extend thanks to the Port of Hood River, who has been a partner and been on the board of the Urban Renewal Agency for 37 years since the inception of the agency. And so any successes of the agency in creating the downtown as we know it today and the waterfront as we know it today is really a joint success of both the city and the partnership of the Port of Hood River. And so just want to recognize them and thank them for their service.
Excellent. Yeah, excellent. Anything else, Will?
That was it.
All right, let's do around the horn to see if there's any comments for the agency from the agency members. Ben. Doug? Megan?
No, second what Will said, I definitely appreciate the work of our partners.
Paul?
No.
Gladys? No? Grant?
Look forward to working with everyone from all agencies going forward.
Excellent. For me, this is my last meeting as chair and being on the agency at all, and Megan as well. So it's been great to work with both the agency members and the professional team. It's been wonderful. Special thanks to the port commissioners who've been on years and years, and we recently agreed to change what's the makeup of the agency, and so the port will be a partner agency that will pull in as needed, kind of thing, just like other agencies will that are appropriate for that project. So I think that's a good move. I appreciate you guys letting me mumble through meetings for the last couple of years, and that is it. Adjourned.
Great. I will take the gavel back and resume the city council meeting. Any agenda additions or corrections, Abigail?
Sorry, no, no additions or corrections.
Great. And my understanding is that the popular attendance is to speak on a specific presentation and not the general
On the
business
public
of the
hearing.
audience.
At this point, I do not have anyone for city council comments, except for the public hearing. I'm just checking with the city recorder. Anybody on Zoom for regular city comments? No.
Is there anyone here who is wishing to speak to us tonight, not about the annexation issue or about the sign ordinance? Great, thank you. That will take us to our first public hearing, and I have a script. I would like to call to order a public hearing of the Hood River City Council to review a proposed legislative text amendment to the city's sign code in Hood River Municipal Code, Chapter 18.02. Let me begin with a brief description of tonight's process and a few disclosures required by state law. Then I will describe the order of events for the hearing. This matter is legislative in nature, so there is no applicant, and the applicant has the burden of demonstrating compliance with the approval standards. We are required to be impartial in our evaluation and free of any conflicts of interest, bias, and undisclosed ex parte context. Before we begin, I will call for a disclosure by each city councilor on each of these issues. Here is the order of events for our hearing. 1, we will begin with a staff report that will describe the background and proposed text changes to the sign code. 2nd, anyone may present testimony on any aspect of this proposal. 3rd, after that, we will check to see if staff has any advice following the conclusion of all public testimony. Here are some basic rules for participating in tonight's hearing. Begin with your name and mailing address. Please limit your testimony to issues that are relevant to the proposed sign code amendment. If you believe that other or different criteria apply, please identify those and explain why you think they should apply. That is all by way of a procedural introduction for tonight's hearing. If anyone has questions about the procedure as we go forward, please feel free to ask them during the public testimony portion of the hearing. To begin, let me call for a declaration of any conflict of interest or bias from each of the councilors. Does anyone wish to declare a conflict of interest on this matter of the sign ordinance? Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to object or question any councilor as to any of these disclosures? With that, we will begin with a staff report. Hey, Chief.
Good evening. Today we're going to bring forward to you ordinance 2086 regards to amendment to Title 18, which is our sign ordinance. It's just going to reference language change due to feather flags, and Marty's going to be the expert talking on the details on it. But that's why we're here today, and it's regards to basically the feather flags has been just kind of a concern the way it's been described in our code.
Basically, we discovered while doing code enforcement for prohibited flags over the summer that our current code kind of doesn't adequately identify feather flags. The question was, is it a flag or is it a sign? So in view of that, got together with the chief and the city manager and then got with Dan, and what you have in front of you is what we recommend as a change so that we don't have any confusion as to how the feather flags are enforced.
Anything else to say at this time, you guys?
I don't. Dan, do you have anything?
Dan, do you have anything to add?
I don't. This is typical kind of evolution of the sign industry. So every couple of years we get these.
Councilors, questions of staff? Doug.
Hi, thanks for coming here and doing this. How pervasive did you feel that this was? I know myself, I've seen a few about town, but how pervasive did you feel that this?
Every spring they crop up for advertising various different, windsurfing, hiding advertisements. And they'll go from one end of town to the other, to include places like McDonald's, gas stations, advertising different foods or specials.
And I guess for clarification, some of those businesses down at like the Spit, for example, that's more, is that the port, or does that fall under this code as well?
or
So like if a business has, for you know, a windsurfing business down at the event site, near the event site where they set up shop, is this code
well,
applicable
the
for that,
event
or is
site
it?
falls under the port.
Right,
So they have their own code. We're concerned with the city as far as our codes and ordinances are concerned.
okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
In the old language for paragraph 6 was about flags that were well above the building, and that's completely gone now. So we're not worried about tall flags anymore? We're just or is the intention to still have that prohibition in addition to the banner flags?
Well, I've been doing this since 2014. I've yet to have a flag flown on top of a building.
Yeah, all right. And we can always come back if
Correct.
it becomes an issue. All right, cool, thanks.
Thanks for being here today. How are we planning to communicate this change to our business community?
Well, we can do it via email through Jen Gray. We can do it on the websites for the city and for the police department. And I could even do something up for the radio.
Maybe including like the Downtown Business Association and some
Correct.
of our other partners, just to let them know. Thank you.
Doug? Ben, I'm sorry.
Well, first, I thought Grant had something. No, okay. I guess for context, in part, me being the newest person on here, and just maybe for people at home or in the audience to understand, why are these like not allowed in general? Like, what's the context in terms of why this is not something that we want as a sign in the city? I'm just curious as to like, what is it about, you know, like feather flags, particularly in terms of that we're like, no, we don't want that.
A little bit of history. I think in 2014, city manager at that time was very much against the style and didn't want feather flags all through the city, just representing people's own decisions and what they want to say or how they want to say it. If we don't address it, they pop up numerous throughout the community, and they just didn't want the clutter. So it was kind of just a design to just say, hey, let's keep it a little bit of housekeeping, do it for the city itself.
Thanks for providing that context.
If I may add something, and city attorney might have more comments, but just, I think the visual clutter, the visual pollution, and some safety issues around like if they might be blocking intersections and pieces, but also to recognize that our sign code, of course, has to be content neutral, right? We cannot discriminate or make rules based on the content. Like we can't allow one feather sign because we like that particular business or because we like the message. So we have to be really, explicit, but content neutral in our regulations.
We also thought that these were not allowed, and I think just recently there was a business that had one and said, look, I've analyzed the language in the code and I've diagrammed the sentences, and I think these things are allowed. So for years, the assumption by the police department said this was a type of sign that wasn't allowed because of, it makes it look like 82nd Avenue used car lot strip. It is, it's all, the sign code is aesthetic.
Awesome. Thank you for providing that context. Appreciate it.
And we have had a few that have been mounted like on the sidewalk or business entrances, and they've spun around in people's faces.
Doug?
And I guess, thinking of other things in this manner that aren't signs, like, is there anything in here that would prevent one of those wild, wacky, inflatable arm flailing tube men or something like that? That's not really a sign, right?
Yes, they are addressed in this new change.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I know they are fun, but yeah, thanks.
All right, I think that's set. Now, is there anyone, again, I think no one said they wanted to speak on this matter. We have the next one coming, but is anyone here to speak to the council before we decide about the sign ordinance? Great.
Mayor, may I make one more comment?
Please, Abigail.
On page 4 of your packet, you have the whereases And thanks to Counselor Saunders, who noted that it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th, whereas has the wrong date. It says a public hearing on November 25th. As you can see, that is happening today, December 9th. So that would be a correction in those whereases.
It was originally set up to come to a hearing last month.
Thank you.
Megan.
Just saying, thank you.
Got it. Great. I will now close the public testimony portion of the hearing and bring it back to council for deliberation decision. Who would like to start? Megan.
I mean, I guess at a base level, it makes sense with the rest of our sign code. It's kind of updating to, you know, as sign modernity and changes or improves. We have a lot of other things about no moving signs, no portable signs, and so this just seems like it is updating language to match our existing code to modern world.
Anyone like to make a motion?
I move we approve resolution 2024-24 canvassing. Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong one. Oops, never mind. Hold on. Hold on. I move to hear, yes, ordinance number 2086, title 18 on tonight's agenda for the first time by title only.
Rivera.
Second.
Second by Mitchell. Further discussion?
Do we have to include the correction in the motion?
With the included correction for date change?
Second.
Are we in order, staff? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Great. Thank you. Thanks, Chief. Thanks, Marty. I will now go ahead, Abigail. Thank you. Is this the clipboard that made the rounds?
Take plate.
Thank you. I have 12 on a piece of paper and 2 on Zoom.
Your Honor,
Yes.
the 2 that signed up for Zoom, they are not online, but I do have someone that popped up, Doug Beveridge, that didn't sign up, but he's there, so I'm thinking he probably wants to speak.
Great, thank you. Doug Beveridge, you said?
Yeah.
I will check in with him, thank you. So, one of the realities of representative democracy is that we run and folks vote and we're elected and we decide. And of course, we're interested in hearing what our affected neighbors and constituents feel about this. And, you know, there's like a time-space issue of like figuring out how to spend the right amount of time. Having 14 people speak on this, 3 minutes each, would be, somebody can do that math. I would encourage folks who speak to realize that there's limited impact on your saying the thing that the 3 other people said, like we got that, you know, so it's just a budgetary thing of time and energy and doing the business of the city. So something I said in a goal setting the other day was try to say just the right amount. I would like to call to order a public hearing of the City Council to review a quasi-judicial request to annex and rezone 2 parcels totaling about 11 acres located at 3330 Brookside Drive, file number 2024-30, the Brookside annexation and zone change request. The Planning Commission heard and recommended approval of the annexation and portions of the zone change. Let me begin with a brief description of tonight's process and a few disclosures required by state law. Then I will describe the order of events for the hearing. This matter is quasi-judicial in nature, and the applicant has the burden of demonstrating compliance with the approval standards. We are required to be impartial in our evaluation and free of any conflicts of interest, bias, and undisclosed ex parte contacts. Before we begin, I will call for a disclosure by each city councilor on each of these issues. Here is the order of events. We will begin with a staff report in which the staff will describe the proposal, the applicable approval criteria, and explain how the proposal meets or does not meet these criteria. Second, the applicant may present testimony. You can assume that we have read the application and other material in the record. Third, anyone else in favor of the proposal may testify. Then we will take neutral testimony or questions, neither for nor against. After that, we will accept testimony from anyone opposed to the proposal. Finally, the applicant gets final rebuttal. The applicant has the last word because the applicant has the burden of proving compliance with the approval standards. After that, we will check to see if staff has any advice following the conclusion of all public testimony. You must raise before us any issue you might want to preserve for an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals, and you must also present to us any evidence that you would want to rely upon in a subsequent appeal. Here are some basic rules for participating in tonight's hearing. Only present testimony in the order I just recited, and please do so from the podium. 2, please begin with your name and mailing address. 3, please limit your testimony to issues that are relevant to the proposal and the approval criteria. If you believe that other or different criteria apply, please identify those and explain why you think they apply. 4, failure to raise an issue during the hearing, either orally or in writing, and failure to provide statements or evidence sufficient to allow us or others to respond to that issue will preclude an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow us to respond to the issue will preclude an action for damages in circuit court. Finally, to ensure we get to hear from everyone who wishes to speak, we are going to set a 3-minute limit on testimony. However, there is no limitation on written argument that may be submitted. I'll say that again. We do read the stuff you submit, so if you feel that you didn't get a chance to say or would like to say something more, please do send it in writing. It's easy to figure out on the website where that goes. That is all by way of a procedural introduction for tonight's hearing. If anyone has any questions about the process as we go forward, feel free to ask them during the public testimony portion of the hearing. Procedural rundown. To begin, let me call for a declaration of any ex parte contacts, conflict of interest, or bias from each of the city councilors. Ben.
I have certainly walked on that section of trail a number of times, know the area well. I believe that I probably reported on the extension in that area, the Devon Creek, or excuse me, Devon Court portion of that when I was a reporter for the Hood River News. Had a couple friends, asking about it because they heard some, stuff on social media, and I told them basically, here's what before council, just that this was the plan. But that is it.
Thank you. Doug?
Similar to Councilor Mitchell, quite familiar with the area. I've been there many times. Also, a number of constituents reached out to try to understand what the process was, how to participate, et cetera. So I've had conversations around that with constituents as well. And that's it.
Thanks, Doug. Megan?
I reviewed some of the application materials as part of my day job with Farmers Irrigation District. You all saw my comment in the material, but I don't have any bias or financial, what's the word there? Financial conflict. Yeah, sorry. It's been a long day already. Financial conflict of interest based on that. But yeah, similarly, I'm obviously very familiar with the general area this property is in.
I've been an active participant in discussions about the trail through Campbell for decades and have advocated for that trail through Campbell for decades. So there's no mystery there. Recently, I had a conversation with a member of the Planning Commission just to get a feel for that discussion. And I talked to staff about some of the questions from that, but that's it.
Aware of the area, I've connected with constituents, but no conflict of interest.
I've been around that area quite a bit on trail runs and outrunning and whatnot, but no other conflicts.
And for myself, much the same as other counselors, well aware of the issue, been on both ends of the trail, contemplated connecting it by foot in the winter, difficult to do, but have no financial conflicts. Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to object or question any counselor as to any of these disclosures? With that, we will begin the staff report.
Again, this is a request on behalf of Rico Prianto and Ken Francis for the annexation and zone change of approximately 11 acres of property currently located within the city's urban growth boundary. This piece is generally about 1,200 feet to the west of Oregon 281 and Brookside Drive. As provided in your staff report and planning commission recommendations, this matter was heard before the city's planning commission on November 18th. Planning commission recommended approval of the annexation of changing a portion of the property to C2. It did not have a recommendation on the northern piece of the property, citing generally limited information regarding future development. This project was advertised and noticed to the state because it is a zone change. It represents a map change to the city. This application was also noticed to property owners within 250 feet of the location. We received a number of comments, mainly regarding impacts to the potential wetlands or the wetlands on the site. This property, although 11 acres, is approximately 6 acres of wetland and floodplain that bisects the property. Additional comments revolved around impact to traffic. The property does anticipate zone changes. You do have a traffic analysis provided by DKS, which is a requirement of any zone change. Those findings are included in your application. And then generally speaking, concerns regarding the limited information regarding future development. The application as proposed now does not contemplate or does not promote or propose new development in association with the zone change. Certainly, we should anticipate future development, future application, but at this time, the request is not to build anything at the time. That being said, the city code and any future development would be processed as a land use application. All development in both the R1, R2, and C2 by way of subdivision or mixed use development do require subsequent land use approvals. There's condition of approval located in your staff report and recommendation that acknowledges this. This is not a unique requirement. This is a standard requirement, whether the property was zoned or not. The reason why it shows up in your application is to really acknowledge some of the concerns that we heard both from planning commission as well as the neighbors, to make an official statement that any development as proposed would be required to return to the city, provide its development applications would be evaluated through the municipal code for both impact to wetlands, riparian corridors, traffic impact analysis. That's a very typical approach that is being not just applied here, but to any subsequent development. Some of the criteria that we looked at and the criteria that the city's asked to evaluate are listed. Actually, they're all listed in your packet. The city's annexation policy and some of the comprehensive plan criteria really come out of the Hood River Municipal Code. It's HRMC 1715. That lists really when and under what circumstances should the city be evaluating annexations, and under what circumstances are evaluations beneficial to the city and really in the public interest. That's outlined in pages, I believe it's between pages 2 and 25 in your staff report. So a short 25-page summary. Then 1708 is the zone change criteria, which you're required to evaluate. That's on pages 25 to 48 in your staff report. It also evaluates the comprehensive plan and contemplates under what circumstances should the city be considering zone changes and the criteria which you evaluate those under. So with that, you have a conditioned approval. There's conditions of approval that are listed within the staff report. We're here for any questions. Be happy to, you're going to hear a lot more information. We'll be here to answer your questions now. After rebuttal, prior to deliberation, we'll also be available to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. The next step is counselors asking questions of staff. Doug?
Thanks, Dustin, and thanks for the very thorough, comprehensive report. I guess, as a planning commissioner, sometimes I grapple with this as well. And what you put in the packet regarding, condition of approval, stated land use approval, I think is helpful in context. Is there anything other than the zone change that's occurring here that would give concessions to the developer to circumvent any of the land use approval that would come subsequent to this?
No, really the change, actually, given that some of the changes and some of the concerns represented had to do with the impact to the wetland and future development, this is listed in the staff report. It's actually important to note that coming into the city and the annexation of the city actually brings additional protections to that wetland and actually riparian corridor that aren't in place now. We have a section of code that falls under the city's natural resources protections that protects Indian Creek, that limits the impact of the wetland, and actually adds additional buffers beyond the higher watermark that aren't currently, where this property isn't protected now. That's unique to the city. So by bringing this into the city, we will not only administer the current codes that are on site, we'll administer additional protections. The city also has a different approach to stormwater management. We have a full-time engineering staff. We're bound by certain stormwater management requirements. So that is also brought into play. We've been in contact with DSL, the Department of State Lands. They're the local permitting authority of this matter. You have the actual approved wetland delineation in sight. So some of the concerns that were expressed had to do with how it was mapped. We actually have the authorities map in place that is in there, that is on file with the state. It binds the developer today, whether it's annexed or not, and it will bind them whether they're rezoned or not. So that is in place for starters. So in terms of circumventing the process, I think there's only more process and procedure that is in place now. We have a deeper requirements for engineering, for public works, for standards that currently, where the property isn't protected today.
Thank you.
Megan?
Sorry, Doug reminded me of this, but so there's city code that's about wetlands and riparian areas. Is that in addition to DSL, or does that replace Department of State Lands?
No, that does not,
management?
definitely does not replace state lands.
That was my ask.
As a requirement, and this is a state law, when we receive development related applications, such as a subdivision, such as a site plan approval, anything that has construction, will notify the Department of State Lands. They have permitting authority. However, at the local level, we will also enforce local regulations in addition to that. And that's where some of the code requirements from our from our zoning ordinance come into play. We have special protections that fall over the Columbia River. We have special protections that fall over in Phelps Creek as well as Indian Creek. By bringing it in, those protections are added here.
Okay, but no, that's good to hear. DSLs, any removal fill still falls in their hands as well. Thank you.
Great.
I have a more higher level question, not related to the wetlands, not related to any of that stuff. This annexation is paired with a zone change, coupled together, cannot be separated. We need to do both of them at once.
You could not rezone the property without annexing it.
Sure.
So they would be by two separate ordinances. The request is, this is a request that's been provided to you. The request is for both.
Mm-hmm. But we could theoretically annex the property and then entertain a request to change zoning. Correct.
Yeah, that's correct.
That's not the question before us.
That's correct.
If I'm reading this correctly, my impression is that this request that's coming before us is a request to annex based off of this rezoning request as sort of a negotiation. And there's nothing necessarily else attached to this outside of annexation and rezoning. There are no plans. There's nothing else attached to this outside of these two elements.
Other than the conditions that have some drivers that take away some of the, or provide some direction on what to be built.
Wetland, a few things like that, right? But the actual structures themselves.
There's no physical development, no.
There's no permit.
No.
There's no drawings drawn up.
No, there's no land division,
No
there's
file.
no right to grade, there's no right to engineering to build vertical construction.
But the requested zone indicates what their hope is and what their plan is.
And then, I understand that, an indication.
Right,
But that is only an indication, that is not actually on paper.
right. There's no development plan before you.
That is not an actual commitment to actually build.
Correct.
So my impression is within the four corners of this would, in other parlance, be a speculative annexation and zone change. And nothing else necessarily beyond that at this current day,
No,
without further detail added by the proposal. by the
not
people.
fully speculative, because we've added conditions of approval in there that would limit, especially on the south side, what would occur. And that's a really important feature because the C2 zone has a full spectrum of uses that would be permitted. As conditioned, there's a statement in here that requires half the dwellings within the C2 zone, or 50%, no less than 10 would be maintained full or for long-term. That limits some of the speculation. To the north, it is an R3 zone with no development plans and no conditions.
Okay, and if you can speak to how it doesn't limit the speculation, that'd be helpful for me. That still begs the question of it being built. It may have those conditions upon it. It still doesn't promise it being built at all.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Okay. So if there's anything else that's not necessarily in the staff report that lends itself to it not being speculative in nature,
Yeah,
that would help me answer my questions. Thank you.
The condition limits the speculation because we start to spec actually some performance of that piece. The other piece that is important, and this is the goal 8 piece, is the condition that the Indian Creek Trail be developed prior to issuance of any permit is listed in there. That's a truly an important feature and aspect of this development that we think in recommendation provides some consideration here. Also not a speculative piece. That is the commitment that we think is an essential piece of any recommendation. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Thanks. We don't do quasi judicial stuff that often. So just to clarify, our job is to judge this application against the specific criteria that are laid out in here. And looking through it seems like those criteria are on page 38, which is the 170804 things, because the 1715 is blah, 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 and then the conditions make sense, but our judgment is to be held to the conditions on page 38. Is that true?
Right. And your distinction between quasi judicial and legislative is also appropriate to Grant's questioning. I'm not used to people characterizing a quasi judicial zone change as speculative. Legislative, yes, where you're dealing with much larger areas where there's no idea. And I see this with port districts. Well, they'll market it, figure out who they can get to lease the land, then they'll try and rezone it. And that's not what's happening here. The reason there's no development proposal here has to do with the structure of the deal. Not because they're guessing as to what they want to do. They're guessing as to whether it's feasible to develop it that way. And they are unable, unwilling to finance the project if even the zoning is unknown. With the other details of development, those are unknown at this point, but they can't make that investment until the zoning is known.
So for the 3 amendment criteria, for those watching from home, this is what City Council, who is the only body that can annex, you're the only body that has annexation power and the only body that can change the map or the comprehensive plan. The 3 criteria when it comes to evaluating are, there was a mistake in the original zone map. which in this instance, we don't believe there was a mistake that necessitates a change. There is a public need for the change that is identified or will be served by changing the zone plan or the designation for the subject property. And in this instance, we look to a lot of your goal 10 analysis through the housing needs analysis, specifically action 1.1 that is outlined in your code. And then 3 conditions have changed within the affected area, and the proposed plan or zone change would therefore be more suitable than the existing plan or zone designation. So those are the 3 things that you're supposed to look at when evaluating each change.
Thank you.
Other questions for Dustin at this point?
Is the trail connection condition part, is that part of the annexation? Or is that part of the zone change? Or is that like a package deal?
Since the ask and the approval is one, I would park it in the annexation piece. Because it's first and foremost, it's also more of a contract aspect to where you have maximum discretion on annexation. So within your conditions of approval, we don't parse those out between conditions of zone change and conditions of annexation. It's just conditions of the request. I also think you're gonna hear that there's part and parcel that they're really not divisible. But there is a condition that's listed in here for your consideration. It is on page 47. It's condition 6. It says prior to the issuance of any demolition, construction, building license, site development, or public access easement, a public access easement for the trail in the form, size, width, and orientation acceptable to the city shall be dedicated and recorded to permit the design, installation, use, and maintenance of the Indian Creek Trail across the subject property. So that's one of the conditions of approval that is listed for your consideration. We have scene plans for the trail as developed by Hood River Parks without evaluation of that orientation. That's why the term and location is rather generic. We want to make sure that we acknowledge its buildability and also really be mindful of any limits and impacts on the wetland, whether it's regardless of the use. From this application, we also did receive letters of support from the school district, from Hood River Valley Parks, as well as Hood River County. They've all supported the application. Their materials are in your packet as well.
Ben?
I know we have this condition in here about 50% of the portion of that building being, long-term dwellings. Some of the comments that were brought up in terms of, workforce housing or attainable housing. Is there, let's see how I ask this. Is there a way, or would it be unwise in terms of throwing a wrench in this potentially is there an avenue to provide some more teeth to that, I guess, is kind of what I'm asking.
Well, we need a clear number. So one of the important ways about writing conditions is as we move along that there's no ambiguity to it. Hence, we have a numerical condition, 50% of the total units or at least 10. So that's really the number. It is not tied to speculation on whether that's affordable or market rate. So that's a really important distinction. Some of the things that we heard about is concern that people are saying this is enough. Don't believe it's an affordable housing project. It's not, there's no affordability standard. And our recommendations are not based upon what could be affordable or not. We just based it on the long-term dwelling aspect to it. So I would probably wait to hear from the applicant regarding adding conditions or seeing what impact that would have to them.
That was my other question. I didn't know if the applicant is here or on.
I believe the applicant is up next.
Okay, great. Awesome. Thank you.
Shall I now invite the applicant to present testimony? I invite the applicant to present testimony.
I'm not gonna use it, so.
Oh, you're not?
No,
Okay.
it's you. I'm gonna assume you all are very well educated on the issue at hand. My name is Rico Prianto. I am the applicant or partial applicant for the project. I live at 705 Oak Street in Hood River. I don't think there's anything else I have to provide there. So I had a presentation created for this, but it's moot point. We're gonna get a bunch of testimony and I'm gonna have a chance to rebut. Part of my big presentation was to pre-rebut some of the things that have been circulating. And I just don't think it's very valuable at this time. I'd rather talk about the motivations of how we got here and why we're proposing what we're proposing. So first I'm gonna say this is one of the most significant and largest undeveloped parcels of land in Hood River that is contained within the urban growth boundary. It's very important that we understand when we look to develop these pieces of land, and whether you look to approve our development proposal or rezone proposal, that City of Hood River has a bunch of documents that kind of lead us and tell us how we need to annex property, how we need to rezone property, and how we need to develop property in a positive way for the community. This includes the buildable lands inventory and housing needs analysis, the Hood River housing strategy, the comprehensive plan, and finally the transportation plan for the city of Hood River. And I think if you review all those documents, they all point directly to what we're trying to do. We're trying to put a trail through that's been bugging the city for decades. Then we approach the project. How can we pay for that, right? Because money drives everything. And so we started thinking, okay, what can we do? We have R1 and R2 zoning. How does that work? Well, that allows 5,000 or 7,000 square foot single family lots. So you buy the land, you extend the utilities, fix access issues, you do the grading. There's no way that we could feasibly put in houses and sell lots and ever recoup our costs, let alone make it worth the juice worth the squeeze, I guess is what I'm saying. So then we met with Dustin and said, look, we have a high degree of desire to put the trail through. What can we do to upzone the properties? And he said, well, there's all these different documents that the city has created over the years, and they tell us what we need to be doing because housing is a major problem in the state, right? We are the worst state in the country for homeless families. The next one is Hawaii, and we're 14 times worse than they are. The study just came out from the Oregon statewide housing report. It's not good. And we're not going to solve that problem by building single family homes on 7,000 square foot lots. We just aren't, okay? So we all have to come to terms with the idea that Hood River needs dense housing. And the only way we can do dense housing is by either R3, C1, or C2 zoning designations. And that's it. And there's not enough land in the city that exists for us to solve the problems that we've all created over the last 50 years in this town. So Dustin and I sat down, came to the conclusion that we want to do dense housing on the south portion. We want to do dense housing on the north portion if we can figure out the issues that exist on that piece. And the only way we can do dense housing is the zoning designations that we have requested. Now, this is an expensive piece of property. It's going to cost a lot of money to bring the utilities, to grade it out, to get it ready, protect the wetlands, stay away from the creek, all the things that this very unique piece of property is going to require. And we determined that the only way that we can offset those costs is by dense development again. So then we started looking at the south side. What can we do here? It's a small postage stamp parcel. It's got steep, it's got wetlands, it's close to the creek, it's close to the street. We have to extend utilities. We have to widen the road. We have to do all the grading. What can we do? And we determined that we have to go up and we have to go down. That's how we can get the density to maximize the parcel and the use and build the most housing that we can. And so that's where the C2 zoning came into play. C2 allows us to do a mixed use, and that way we get an extra story. That allows us to go down towards the creek and up towards the sky. So that's where that came from, just so everyone understands how this all happened. It started with a trail, and the byproduct is we came up with a proposal to build housing for the city and the residents. Then we looked at, again, the north side and said, what can we do? We don't know what we can do over there. There's lots of limitations. We've got extensive wetlands. They've been mapped. It's been adopted by DSL. So there's no question of where the wetlands are, how far they go. There's no question, can we build in those wetlands? That's not an option. We've talked to DSL. We've had meetings with their staff. There's no mitigation opportunities in the same watershed. So we can't just rip out all the wetlands, and it's not possible. It'd be illegal. We're not doing illegal things. So that's not an interest. We have about 4 acres over there that are developable. We have other issues. There's topography, there's access, there's all kinds of things going on the north side. But the good news is, if we can buy the property, put the trail through, develop the south side, we have 10 years to figure out how to make the development feasible and valuable to us on the north side. We've also spoken with the neighbors and the community that's concerned, and we have opted to negotiate with them to sell them the north portion. If they're deeply concerned about keeping the land, steward it, they can band together. There's over 100 very high value homes in the neighborhood above us and all these concerned citizens. I'm sure that through partnering with nonprofits or whatever, they can find a way to buy that north parcel and protect it the way that they think it should be protected. If that doesn't work out, we have to find a way to do something on the north parcel that helps offset the investment that we're making to get the trail through. So that is the history of how we got to where we are. The land is challenging. And for us to go spend an incredible amount of money trying to figure out all the buildings, what they're going to look like, what the materials are, what shape they are, when we don't even have a zoning designation yet that would allow for any of that to ever be built, it's infeasible to do that. And it's not something that we would ever entertain. The zoning is in place, then we can go try and figure out and solve all the problems that exist on this parcel. Without the zoning, there's no reason to even go down the road of trying to solve any problems of what the building looks like, how many stories it is, what size the units are. Nobody cares because it doesn't matter, right? Right now, we've got single family homes, and that's it. The reason why we are annexing it as well is because there's city utilities on this property already. City code requires if utilities are available, you have to tie into them. If you have to tie into them, you have to annex. You cannot be a part of the county and tie into city utilities. So this whole thing is just a flywheel that's created where we are now with our request, which is we want to put in a trail. How do we do that? We need to build housing. How do we do that? We need to annex and rezone. So here we are. So, we've come along this whole journey. We've come up with some great ideas. I think we have a viable way to make this happen. And to be honest, nobody in the history of this city who's worked on this project, which every developer I've talked to, they've looked at the site. Every single one of them told me we're crazy to even go down this road. It's too hard, it's too expensive, and it's just not possible. We are a unique group of developers because I am a civil engineering consultant. This is what I do for a living, and I'm on the development side and ownership side. So I'm capable of spending a lot of time and effort without having to pay for it to solve some of these issues and figure out if this is possible. This is not an extremely impressive return on this project, no matter what we do. We are struggling to get it to pencil no matter what, even with all the zone changes and, the hotel use allows us some short-term transient use and long-term rentals, and maybe do something on the north side. Maybe the neighborhood can band together and figure out how to buy that from us. All of these things, and we are struggling to make it work. So this is razor thin. And, honestly, we've come to the conclusion that if we can't get the zoning and the annexation together, it doesn't make sense, and we're going to have to walk on the project, unfortunately. So it's really in your hands on whether the city has the will. We've given them the way. And so that's kind of where we stand.
Thank you. Questions of council? By council of the applicant?
That's an easy one. Where the part that you want is zone commercial. I'm sure you've considered looking at rezoning that R3.
Which part?
The upper section that you want is zone
The
commercial.
south, we call it the south side.
The south.
Yeah, if it's R3, we're stuck at 35 feet.
Mhm.
It doesn't even use the natural topography of that parcel very well.
Mhm.
We're super constrained on the flat part, so we have to go down. If we go
Right.
down, we can't go up.
Doesn't
So
pencil.
It just doesn't pencil. It doesn't make sense. It's just too expensive, unfortunately. We've determined that the project has to kind of stand alone based on the investment and the return on the south parcel, and it doesn't. unfortunately. Even at C2, it doesn't. That's why we're going for potential north rezone, figure out what we can do down the road. You know, land is going to become more valuable over time, and maybe it makes sense in a couple of years or 3 years or 4 years. We just don't know. Right now, it's unviable to buy this property and do anything with it. So
Thanks for clarifying.
you're welcome.
Doug?
Thank you. Just curious about, you said that in terms of your thought process, want to get a trail in, have to develop to do it. Usually, you know, when we're working with conditions for annexation, et cetera, we're trying to pull that sort of strategy out. You know, if I were Dustin and you came to talk to us about that property, the first thing I would want him to say is, well, we want a trail there. So I was just wondering if you could speak to a little bit about your vested interest and why you're interested in the trail being there.
Sure. So I have my own interests. Ken has his own interests. You know, I'll start with him because he's not here and it's easy. He broke his leg horribly 6 or 7 years ago riding dirt bikes here in the wilderness and had a year of rehab. And his main rehab was just walking the Indian Creek Trail. That was all he had. And he always had to stop and turn around. So it was always a bug in his ear that he wished it went through. I moved here in 2020. He broke his leg prior to 2020. I think it was 2018 or 17 when it was. I moved here and was talking to Ken, and he told me the story about the trail. And then I got to know the city. My house is on the Indian Creek Trail as well. So me and my family walk it all the time. I had identified this property. I didn't realize that the trail went through this property. I just said, hey, that's an interesting piece of property. It's 11 acres. And Ken said, that's where the trails go through. And so we started talking about it. We actually tried to negotiate with the owners back in 2021 or 2020, whenever that was, and it didn't go anywhere. Subsequently, Parks and Rec was able to put it on a contract, tried to go through the process, failed. Not surprising. It's an extremely hard piece of land to make work, even as a public agency. And ultimately, I see my kids are going to be going to high school in 5 years, 4 years, and there's no feasible path for them to get there on their bikes, except for by streets, which just isn't going to happen. We don't allow them to do those types of things. And I think a lot of people in the community have the same concerns. And so, again, usually I would come up with an elaborate development plan, go to Dustin, say, hey, we want to do all this stuff. And he'll say, yeah, let's talk about the trail. Let's talk about the roadway widenings. Let's talk about all the things you have to give us in order for us to give you that. And this was a different process. It's a unique situation in that I went to Dustin and said, hey, we want to buy this property and get the trail. How can we figure out with you how to do it? And that was the whole thought process of this project. So
Thank you for that context.
Good. I already asked this question to Dustin, but I'll ask it. You heard my question about the, you know, workforce attainable element of it. I know that, you know, a lot of times some of these things will come up where, you know, people want to do these things generally, but sometimes, you know, cost of inflation or any number of things can, you know, hurt the ability to do that. And then you commented on, you know, it being a razor thin margin. So I know that there's nothing like, you know, obviously there's going to be a development application at some point, all of that, but I don't know if you can talk a little bit more about that element of the project in terms of.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So affordable housing, attainable housing, middle housing, workforce housing, these are terms that are set by the state of Oregon, and they're terms that are set in the city's own documents that they've produced, setting goals for the city. So we're using this nomenclature that came from the city's documents. We perceive affordable housing as being very low income, middle housing, a little bit less. Workforce housing is like a 90 to 120% income level is what we're considering. And I think that there's a general consensus that that is kind of the definition of that. We've done extensive analysis of how much is it going to cost to build and how much are we going to be able to charge in rents. That's the analysis, right? Nobody's going to develop a building and not be able to get a return on it. It'd be better to leave your money in the market, right? And so, you know, a workforce housing, which is like a nicer than normal rental in Hood River, but certainly not the nicest rental you're going to find in Hood River. And that generates about $2 a square foot. And so that's generally the, you know, what we're going for with the South project specifically. It's going to be a very expensive building to build. It's going to take all the infrastructure upgrades and all the things just to get the site ready. And so that's when I say it's razor thin, is we're struggling to figure out how to make something like that work. So that's where workforce housing comes from. The south side, we're targeting workforce type housing, be a little bit nicer, but not really nice. Luxury housing there, I don't think works. It's too tight. They're going to be small units. The north side, probably lower income housing, to be honest. It's got a much more intensive cost to develop. It's got a much more intensive grading operation. We've got to work out access. It's going to take years to figure out all those things. And it just seems like, you know, workforce housing is not going to work over there. We're going to have to do it at such a scale that affordable housing is the only thing that's really going to work. But we have no idea what we're going to do over there. There's so many extreme challenges that have to be solved before we know whether we can even do anything there. That it's kind of a moot point to talk about what happens over on that side.
Well, thanks for providing that additional
You're welcome.
context.
So for council, the next step is I will invite those who are in favor of the application to testify. You guys ready to go on to that step? So it doesn't say on here your position, but of the folks who signed up to speak, there's someone who would like to declare that they are in favor and would like to start us off? Megan. Tell us your name and address,
Yes.
please.
Megan Ramey, 1886 Belmont Street.
Excuse me, Megan. Jen, you got your timer going? Yeah. Thank you. Go ahead, Megan.
Thank you for allowing me the ability to speak. I was going to be doing it on Zoom on the cat bus, but couldn't get the Zoom link. Anyway, I'm wearing two hats tonight. My first hat is as the Safe Routes to School manager for Hood River County School District. You guys have already received the support letter from them. In addition, you received my earlier email today about the petition that we circulated to engage the families further and to get people to know what's going on within city council, send you guys support letters. 229 people signed that petition. This is a top 5 project for me. I told my husband when we applied for the Indian Creek Trail grant through ODOT, if I was somehow able to help Parks District win the grant and we were able to make this connection happen, I could retire happy. Like when we couldn't accept the funding because of federal regulations, I was like, we just need to start a GoFundMe. I went through the same thought process as Rico. Like if I had like $2 million, how would I develop that land? Because the Indian Creek Trail is the most important part of this whole project. And that's where I take my Safe Routes to School manager hat off and put my other hat on as a mother. So hi, Megan. Advocate, it's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. I just came from Taylor Swift concert in Vancouver, BC with my daughter. Straight from the train just to here. And my daughter bikes to school like every day that she misses the bus. And we can get some black ice in the winter. And I'm terrified that she's going to be going down Indian Creek Road, hit a patch of black ice, slide out in front of a truck, and she's gone. And this is not just me as a mother. I'm a mother of my daughter. I'm also a mother of like a ton of other kids in our community because I know them. I teach them how to bike. They don't have any safe infrastructure. So that's me as a mother. Like this is a very important project to me and I'm very selfishly motivated. I'm also a former planning commissioner and know how local politics going through the whole Adams Creek co-housing. I was on planning commission during that and seeing that stall because of neighbors that live next door who honestly have rightful questions. But I know the process works. I believe in our zoning. I believe in our system. So that's all I want to say, but thank you so much.
Thanks, Megan.
Yeah.
Someone else self-categorizing as in favor in the back, please.
Hi, council. My name is Nan Noteboom and I live at 3125 Farwig Road in Odell. And I am on the board of directors for the Hood River Valley Parks and Recreation District. If you want to hear a room full of parks people groan, whisper those three little words, the Campbell property. Your partner, Hood River Valley Parks and Rec District, has tried and tried to complete the Indian Creek Trail. This property has been the key. And I don't mean it's key as in it's kind of important. I mean, it is the key. Parks and Rec was under contract to buy this property for the purpose of completing the trail and to preserve open space in a natural area. Due to the ineligibility of an ODOT grant and our failed spring ballot measure, we had to give up our option to buy it. A local developer who is in the process of purchasing the property wants to build housing there. As a condition of their plan, they will be required to give Parks and Rec an easement to finally complete the Indian Creek Trail. Our city needs that housing and our community needs that trail. Obviously, Parks and Rec is in favor of preserving nature and open space. Yes, a 2022 wetland delineation of the property identified 6 acres of wetland that will not be developed and will remain open space. But the trail would be near this area and we believe it would make a good buffer between any possible development and the natural area. An easement, which again would be a requirement of annexation, would complete the gem of our city's trails. It is a trail that is heavily used by our community and our shared constituents. Those constituents have asked for this link for years. The completion of this trail would enable kids to walk or bike to school from many different areas of town. It would connect the college and the high school and the Heights to the west side. Also, the completion of this missing trail link is identified in the Joint Agency Parks Master Plan and the City of Hood River's Transportation Plan. I ask you to approve the annexation and rezoning. For many years, we have tried to get an easement using negotiation, transaction, collaboration, invitation, grants, land trusts, I mean, you name it. This may be the only foreseeable way to connect this valuable community trail. It's what's best for our whole community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. In favor? Come on up in the back and then over here to the left.
Hello, my name is Christy Christopher, and I am the current president of the Parks and Rec Board. I live at 880 McKenna Lane, which is on the property directly north of this property, and slightly to the west. I would just want to raise a few points. Nan has already said some really helpful points. One is that Parks and Rec has extensively explored and exhausted options that have been suggested by the public online and in other meetings. They've been working on this project for decades and see this as perhaps the remaining last option to get the trail through. A second point is I want to call out that there are definitely legitimate concerns by neighbors, especially regarding the north side. But at the same time, there are 6 acres that have been delineated as wetlands, and that adds a lot of restrictions in terms of what can be done. And that the decision before you tonight is about the annexation and the rezoning. It's not about what exactly is going to be done. There's many years to figure that out. And then finally, you know, this does provide the ability to explore other options in this new context if you approve the proposal before you today. But it means for sure that we will get a way forward for the Indian Creek Trail to provide access to the high school from downtown and to complete a project that has been pursued for decades and benefits countless residents of all ages. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Over here.
Hey folks, Lock Litwer, 2204 Sherman Ave. Good to be here again. See some of you for the first time, some of you after many times. here to speak in support of this project for a few reasons. First of all, as I'm sure some of you already know, I have a personal stake in housing in that we moved here and we literally had to leave what we thought was going to be our forever community because we couldn't find a place to live after the place that we were living flipped back into summer housing for visitors, right? Could not, for love or money, find a place to live. We're fortunate to be able to find a place we could buy. We're able to move back. That actually inspired my career in becoming a housing builder. You know, I've been grinding at that for a long time here. I want to speak a little bit about you know, the personal piece, which is that, hey, you know, people need places to live here. I don't need to tell you, that's hard, right? Also, we heard from some folks, from Megan and some folks in the Parks District. You know, my kids are some of those kids who, when they get to the age they're going to the high school, that is going to be the way that we want them to get to that school. We don't want them traversing those streets when it's cold and it's dark, you know, in the middle of the winter. We'd much rather have them be on that trail where it's much safer. And frankly, it's just a lot more fun. Brass tacks, you know, these kinds of processes, it led with it. You know, you've got goal 6, environmental. Love that it was called out that we have an additional layer of protection on that wetland here in the city. You know, goal 8, recreation. You know, you guys know this would be an absolute master stroke for the city to be able to connect that trail, you know, bring it all the way through, alternative transportation, and then goal 10 to housing, right? Change is hard. Change is hard for the people who need to be in the community where it's happening and don't necessarily get a vote. Change is hard for the people who need to assess the priorities and figure out, are we going to make this change happen? Right? But we have a process. We've said, what are our goals? And this development helps us to scratch some of those goals if we can get it over the finish line. You know, the applicant was up here talking about the difficulties of this project. I am one of the people who looked at that project. And I got to tell you, as somebody who's not an engineer, I walked because it's really hard. And I didn't see any way that somebody's going to make that work, you know, in any kind of an economic commercial basis. I thought, gosh, if this ever happens, it's going to be concessional. It's going to be grant funded. The fact that we got somebody who is an engineer, who's able to put that genius to work making this project happen, that's a gift. Let's not squander it. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Anyone else would like to speak in favor? Come on up.
Peter Cornelison, 1003 Fifth Street, Hood River. Mr. Mayor, fellow council members, I was pleased to hear that most of you have at least visited part of this property on the trail, but I'd also like to suggest you go to the Brookside Street road location, the one that has the big sign. Also Broken T and the north side property owners that border the creek. I've met with the developers, I've met with some of the property owners, and there's a deal that is possible. It's so possible because the north side property owners are willing to buy and conserve the north side of the creek. The south side can go to development. And it really, as you heard, it's our last best chance to get the trail in. I know that the structure, this may not fit the normal deal mode for the city, but I'm asking you to stretch whatever it takes to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Others in favor, and then we will move on to neutral, which is an exciting thing to categorize oneself as, and then opposed. Anybody want to come up as in favor? Anyone want to come up as neutral? Please.
I didn't get my name on the list. Is that okay?
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Bernard Yu, 760 Henderson Road. I'm consider myself neutral because I'm torn on this issue. I see the benefits of both sides. Regardless of what the final decision is, what I would hope for is that all relevant issues are considered. One issue that's recently in the news is that homeowners insurance across the country and presumably across the world are going up. And one of the principal causes of that is the increasing frequency and intensity of extreme weather events. So I'm not going to go into causes, but the fact is weather events are getting more extreme more frequently. So given that, have all parties involved considered the implications for future insurability? You know, whether insurance is available even, or if it is available, the cost of that insurance, given the nature of this property, of this land, if any structures are developed, especially if it's developed for housing to meet the critical housing needs, you know, what is the risk of insurability of such a project? And again, regardless of the outcome, I do hope that all parties involved will take that issue into consideration and not neglect that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bernard. Anyone else under the neutral category? Then we'll start with Maddie Bosler.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Maddie Bosler. I live at 993 Montana Court. I'm here to oppose the rezone application. And while I support responsible development and the completion of the Indian Creek Trail, this proposal does not meet the standards required to preserve and promote public health, safety, and welfare as outlined in Director Nielsen's staff report on page 40. I want to focus on how this proposal fails to meet 4 factors pertinent to the preservation and promotion of public health, safety, and welfare. Number 1, the character of the area. Rezoning the northern parcels to R3 is incompatible with the character of the surrounding area. The north and west are bordered by low-density residential neighborhoods, while the property itself includes wetlands and steep slopes that naturally limit its development potential. High-density zoning here would introduce incompatible uses, increase traffic, disrupt the quiet residential character of these neighborhoods. Streets like Broken T Drive, Avalon Way are already narrow and not designed to handle significant traffic increases. Without adequate access or infrastructure improvements, this rezoning jeopardizes neighborhood safety and quality of life. Number 2, peculiar suitability for particular uses. While the staff report highlights the property's size and access to utilities, it fails to adequately consider the environmental constraints. The wetlands and steep slopes significantly reduce the net buildable area, making high-density development impractical. Rezoning this land without addressing these limitations serves speculative interests, rather practical, community-focused planning. Its most suitable use lies in its ecological value and potential as open space that complements the area's character. Number 3, conservation of property values. Rather than conserving property values, this rezoning risks devaluing surrounding residential areas by introducing transient lodging, increased traffic, and potential environmental degradation. Without a clear and realistic development plan, the primary beneficiary of this rezoning would be the current landowners who stand to gain an inflated resale value, offering little tangible benefit to the community. Number 4, the direction of building development. The staff report emphasizes the importance of efficient land use within the urban growth boundary, but efficiency should not mean approving speculative zoning changes without sufficient access or infrastructure. True efficiency prioritizes areas ready for immediate development, such as the Rand Road project. Premature rezoning of these parcels is not only impractical, but also counterproductive. Given these concerns, I respectfully request the council to defer its decision by 45 days, allow time for the neighboring property owners and applicant to continue purchase negotiations. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Maddie. Jeff Hunter, followed by Jeff Killingsworth. Walk fast.
Jeez. Jeff Hunter, 999 Montana Court. I'm going to follow Maddie's testimony and ask that you slow down and give some time for negotiations here. As I think Mr. Polson mentioned, to grant a zone change now to a higher use is speculative. It makes the land more valuable. It makes it more difficult to purchase for the public. And as everybody has said so far, the deed for this trail goes back 30 years. I could tell you stories, but you've only given me 3 minutes, so I'll forget about that. This is the classic situation here. Almost all of your city goals are on the table here, right down the line. Equity, affordable housing, open space, trails, connectivity. If you haven't yet, and I'm glad to hear that most of you, or at least perhaps all of you, have gone down and visited the site. It really is the largest untouched, unprotected natural area inside the entire urban growth boundary. Thanks to the Campbell family, it's been preserved in its original condition for 70 years now. And when I got to thinking about it, this land, what never was developed, it wasn't put to use by our forefathers because they couldn't put it to use. So this land has been in the same condition since the Klickitats gave it up in 1855. And I think we need to think about that a little bit and think about how we can keep all of that for all of us. I've known the land well. We've been there since '79. It's a jewel. I could tell you more stories there. It doesn't make sense to zone a wetland and a small amount of steep upland for affordable housing. I mean, just look at it. It doesn't make sense. And the thing that bothers me probably the most is this talk about affordable housing, workforce housing that has been used so far. It's mentioned 4 times in the application. It's a ruse. This isn't going to happen. These are going to be expensive homes. They have to cross almost 200 feet of wetland just to get to the dry property. And the land is steep, as you've seen on your maps. It's listed as a slide zone, and it's not a proper use for this land. We are in negotiations. We are reasonably close, and we need 2 things. We need more money, which we're working on, and we need somebody to take the property, which I hope will be Parks. But it's time for this whole community to own this land once and for all and stop these ridiculous attempts to develop a land that has problems beyond belief. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Jeff, followed by Jennifer Killingsworth.
Hi, nice to meet everybody. My name is Jeff Killingsworth. I live at 3406 Broken T Drive. I'm actually where the rubber meets the road. So our easement, or the easement that is the developer has said that they may need to use, goes through our property. And also we abut tax lot 200. When we constructed our home, we were the last ones to build anywhere within the perimeter of this property. Within a year of construction, we spent an extensive amount of time in construction just with our foundation work after we discovered water issues. Within the water issues that we've resolved, we thought we resolved, had engineering come in, we had great contractors that are local area. We redesigned everything to build the house there. Within a year, our crawl space started filling with water. We've had to install 3 pumps. At any one time, the pump magnitude I could fill a 5-gallon bucket in about a minute and a half, and it would take about 60 seconds to fill up again 24/7. So that's the condition that's there now. The wetlands report that you have, all the sampling has been done up closer to the northern side of the land. If you comes down, you look at your maps that was provided to you, you can see where the sample points were all put. Nothing has been done closer to the wetlands area, closer to Broken T. That's a needed access for this property to work at any one time. So we'd ask that you deny this until, again, I would love that see it go into open space. We can't do a partial denial is what I'm being told today. As far as tax lot 200, I think tax lot 200, if you were to leave it alone and let it be natural as it is, that would be a buffer that would stop any type of hydraulics problems once development is put through, any changes of surface, water runoff, flooding, floodplain, any of that could all be changed and actually possibly mitigated. We are the lowest point on all the elevations, myself, my neighbor, and our neighbors across the street. So anything that's done uphill comes down to us. We can't raise our homes, our foundations, nothing we can do. We can't go higher on our properties. So we're the lowest point. Water always seems to gravitate that direction. So anything that you do, we will be the ones that are definitely affected long-term, not partial. I would love the trail to go through. We walk it pretty much every day. I would love to be able to walk out my door, walk right on the trail. That would be amazing. But what I don't want to do is sacrifice our foundation, our neighbor's foundation, our street, and of our community for the just when there's other ideas that are still could be brought forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Jennifer and then Doug Powery.
I'm Jennifer Killingsworth. I live at 3406 Broken T Drive. I did bring a map to kind of see how the street ends in a loop. The issue that we have is that the end of the cul-de-sac, the street goes from 35 feet in width down to 14 feet at its narrowest point. So where that loop goes through, there's only one car that's going to go in one direction. The other problem that we have is in order to access the potential of getting to the behind our houses is to go through that easement. So that means that you would be turning onto a 60-foot wide road from a 15 or 14-foot. So the physics of trying to get traffic in and out is a big concern. And it's also a concern because you have kids on bikes, you have people that are walking on the street. There's not enough room for 2 cars and a bike, or even to, a lot of times you're walking in the street because there's just not enough room. The most difficult part about this is there's no really way that you can widen the street without taking a chunk of all of our properties. I would love to see the trail go through, and I hate that, hate's a strong word, but I do hate that it's connected to development. I think the river, there's a lot of places that I see, we have open land. I think the city should focus on getting affordable housing, and it but it shouldn't be in the middle of a wetlands or at a dead end street. This street goes straight through, there's no cross streets. So you've got a half mile to go down to a dead end, loop around and come back. There's no cross streets. The fire department has to get their traffic through again on a 15-foot wide street. I would love to see our city focus on finding feasible and not so expensive, not so impossible locations to put housing. I'm all for it. Thank you very much.
Doug, followed by PJ.
Hi, I'm Doug Powery. I'm the attorney for Doug and Susan Beveridge. And I would like to address a few points that I think have been mentioned, but I'd like to focus on them and let you know that I believe that as to the north side of this property, there is absolutely no conceivable access to facilitate development of the north side above Indian Creek. I congratulate the applicant for being brutally honest about this. They say, well, we don't have any plans for it because we don't know what we can do with it. And maybe in 10 years, well, maybe in 50 years. But right now there are no access points. And these have been subject of dispute in previous development in the past that, you know, it never has worked out. So I urge you to bifurcate if you're leaning toward an approval of one half of this application. The annexation, that may make sense. And no one has objected to that as a topic, as far as I can tell. The rezone, though, is a mirage. It doesn't make any sense except to an applicant who has to take his property proposal to a bank and say, look, I've got this and I've got this. This is R3, it's high intensity development, when in fact it's not. The real essence of this application is about the commercial development on the south side. They're not going to build a 200-foot bridge span over the wetlands to reach the north side. So I urge the members of the city council to look at this from a pragmatic standpoint. What you're really doing by allowing the rezone on the north side is just putting a name on a map. You're not accomplishing anything. And I know that many of you have run on platforms that talk about housing and providing for the Hood River citizens that can't afford it or don't have enough of it, and so they want more. But I urge you to look at this realistically. We're not against the trail. We're not against people building where it's practical. But we are against having a rezone of a property that's just in name only. Thank you.
PJ and then JP.
Hi, I'm PJ Portlock. I live at 2105 Avalon Way. I wanted to talk for a minute about speculative zoning. Mr. Nelson said in the last meeting that we were here that this property qualifies as speculative zoning. As a practice, that has been attributed to inflated land prices, the housing affordability crisis, and wealth inequality. In his staffing report, he said the zone change from an R1 to an R3 is likely to increase the overall value of that property. So the upzoning essentially artificially inflates the value of a steep hillside that is now in a documented wetland, a floodplain, and at high risk for landslide. So essentially this rezoning starts to feel like it's perpetuating the rising costs of available land. It accelerates the problem that we're all trying to solve of affordable housing, and it undermines the city council's objective of creating these affordable housing and the goals that you outlined. So my question moving forward is, like, if we're going to allow speculative zoning proposals to move forward, how do we plan to get ahead of it and not have those practices come into play? Do we just let everybody speculate and just imagine futures untold, unforeseen? Do we look into a crystal ball and that's how we make our decisions? The second piece I'd like to talk about is the landslide risk. So according to FEMA studies in the state of Oregon, we have maps that show the entire north side is at high risk for landslide. And the developer is proposing to put, in his own words, our lowest income residents into a high risk landslide zone. Does that make sense to anyone here? And then the gentleman just came up and talked about insurance. So now you're putting people who are totally vulnerable, and you're going to add anxieties, financial anxieties to them of insurance costs. And just for funsies, we're going to throw in a floodplain. Like, it makes no sense. And the fact that we're even here having to debate that is like, it's frustrating, you know, like, just look at the map. The last point I want to make is that this proposal isn't just speculative zoning, it's a Trojan horse. So it's the oldest tactic in the book. So you say one thing, you present a gift, and everybody goes to sleep, and the doors open, you lose the castle, and then everybody's embarrassed. So rezoning, if approved, it allows the developer to create a scenario that leaves all types of ill-defined uses. You've seen it, you've read through it, there is no plan. It's all speculative. The development is not going to provide affordable housing because of the high cost of building. You just heard from him. He said his margins are razor thin. Who's here has done any type of a building project? 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 times the cost can go over. I urge you to delay. Thank you for your time. I appreciate your service and everything you do. Thank you.
Thank you, PJ. JP Fisher, followed by Brian Petros.
I'm JP, I'm gonna pass.
JP passes. Brian Petros.
Well, I'm Brian Petros. I live at 3413 Broken T Drive. Thanks for hearing me today, Mr. Mayor and council members. As a neighbor to the property, I just want to say I am 100% in support of the Indian Creek Trail project. And I think almost everybody here is supportive of that project. And I appreciate JP or PJ's comment about the Trojan horse. Sorry if I wasn't paying attention. I think we're looking at this as a promise of completing this trail if we approve this zoning change. And I just don't see that that is the only option here for getting the trail in. In fact, I see it as a hindrance. We've heard of all of the challenges with this property. Developers I mean, the current developer and applicant admittedly said that many other developers looked at this property and walked away because of all the challenges. Developers with from farther away with deeper pockets looked at this property, walked away. So in this zoning change, is this trail becoming a condition of approval? It then puts another chip in their basket, a card in their hand to say, oh, we need, if you want this trail down the road, we need this concession on development. We need to get this road in, we need to concede some other condition or current municipal code to be overlooked or bypassed because we want to get this trail in. And if you want the trail in, this is what we need to do to make our razor thin margin project feasible. So I look at it as being a hindrance in getting the Indian Creek Trail through. And again, to echo what many other people have said, seems like there's a lot of other options out there. Not all options have been exhausted, I will say, to get the Indian Creek Trail project completed without sacrificing the natural area, sacrificing the wetland, sacrificing safe access in and out of Broken T Road. Thanks.
And there was a moment when Park Chambers was online. Do we think Park Chambers wishes to speak?
And I'm gonna Rob W. So you want me to unmute?
Want me to unmute Doug and see if he wants to speak?
Doug Howery, do you think Doug Beveridge wishes to speak?
I don't think so.
Okay, what about, you want me to unmute Rob W? I don't know who that
Let's give
is.
Rob W a moment if perhaps he wishes to speak.
Okay.
Rob W, this is the mayor. Would you like to speak? It's okay if yes, it's okay if no.
No, thank you. Just watching.
Great. So that concludes the testimony. Councilors, would you like to clarify or question any of the testimony? All right, I'm keeping track here. The applicant now has an opportunity for final rebuttal.
Thanks for letting me come up and provide a little bit of rebuttal. I mean, I think when we approached this process, we didn't want it to become adversarial with the neighborhood or the community. I think ultimately it's your job to determine whether the city of Hood River will benefit from this or won't benefit from it. And we've always approached this as we want to get the trail through. How do we make that work? And we've come up with a plan on how to do that. And if you as city council, the deciding body, feels that what we've come up with isn't good for the city, then we will accept absolutely your decision. You know, I've heard about a lot of things that people brought up, some good points, some less good points. You know, we talk about insurance costs. That's so far down the road. We're not going to worry about that. We don't even know what we're building, so how can we ever determine what insurance it takes to protect it? You know, there's a lot of talk about the existing streets being deficient, and most of the time when you go into a development process, the streets serving that development are deficient and need to be upgraded. It's a very normal part of the process. Typically, streets are built for the use that they're serving, and then they're upgraded to serve the additional use. If we never upgraded streets, we would never build anything ever. So that is easily dealt with when the time comes. Open space, all I have to say there is I wish it was open space too, but the property has been for sale for many, many, many years. And all of the advocates for keeping it as open space never put any effort into trying to achieve that. So we've come up with a proposal to at least save some of it. There's potential that some developer who's much smarter than we are comes along, comes up with a new plan on how to make this happen. And it potentially will most likely be much more intensive and much more horrible for the community. So, you know, this is what we've come up with. If you don't think it's viable, we're fine with that. I think it's important to note that we are not asking this property to be rezoned for affordable housing. We're asking for it to be rezoned for multifamily housing. We don't know what the character of the housing will be when we ultimately find a way to design it and build it. There's just so many issues at hand. Economics have to do with it. Everything has to do with it. So we are just asking for you to grant us the ability to start working on that, which is what the zoning provides. Without the zoning change, it's single family homes, 2 or 3. That's what you get. So there's no reason to work on what we can do as far as creating housing for the city if we don't have the zoning that makes it possible to even create multifamily housing. I guess there's a lot of comments about the site's very expensive to build, it's hard to access, all these items kind of makes their arguments mute, because it doesn't matter what the zoning is if we can't physically develop it. So they shouldn't be that concerned if they're so sure that everything is so hard to do and so impossible to achieve. By granting us the zoning, it lets us to start to work on it. We're experts at this. This is what we do. We can start to chip away at those issues and see if it's possible. It may not be possible, but we may find a way. And so that's what we're asking is, do you want us to start chipping away at those problems or not? Heard about hydraulics issues, and I feel for you. I mean, that is a horrible thing to have at your home, that it's at the bottom of a wetland and it's having hydraulic issues, but this is an existing condition. It's illegal for us to exacerbate that. And in the end, we have very sound engineering principles that have been developed over the last few centuries to make sure that we don't cause more problems. You already have problems. I wouldn't be concerned about what we're gonna do. We're liable for what we do to your property. So, you know, the first thing you do is you try and figure out what the problem is, and then figure out if it gets worse. We're not going at this project thinking we're gonna make Broken T horrible. We're gonna make, you know, Avalon Way horrible. That's not how we're approaching the project. I think what I hear here is that everybody wants the trail, but no one has any way of figuring out how to make it happen. And so we are providing that opportunity potentially. We just need the city to tell us whether or not our approach is acceptable. So I think that's all I really have to say. So we've done our best to try and make this happen. And if it's not what you want, that's fine. Thank you.
Any final comments from staff before council deliberates?
I think we just had one clarifying remark. In terms of the landslide hazard mapping, the city has a comprehensive plan that involves natural hazards and locations. The county has a similar plan that identifies geohazard zones. At this time, in this location, we do not have nor does the county have a geohazard overlay on this property. So just for the point of clarification, we do not have that. In the city, there is geohazard zones. They are identified, they are mapped. They're predominantly would be in the location of the Powerdale corridor and from Sherman Avenue up to Hazel on the East Side Drive. So there are some various spots. This is not one of them on our maps nor the county maps.
Thank you, Dustin. Any other final comments for us before the next step, Dustin?
No, from this point, we're available for your questions. It would be now a matter of closing the record, deliberating, render a decision. We have not prepared ordinances for tonight. Depending on your direction and from here, if the city chooses to in fact rezone this property and annex, you would direct us to prepare ordinances and the development agreement to do so. We would bring that at a later time after we prepared them for your consideration and reading.
Thank you, Dustin. Mark, do you have just a quick deliberation or just a question? Go ahead.
For the geohazard stuff, would that be part of any development proposal? I would assume so.
If it were mapped, we would. For example, there was a section of Seaver Crop that had geohazard concern. We mapped that at the development stage and land division stage. He wanted to condition approval on a geohazard investigation. That would be fine. We don't have any indication right now that there's a geohazard overlay that would trigger that code. However, by way of engineering, laying utilities, there would be some subsurface investigation to determine whether this thing holds.
So the question is, should that be at this stage, or is that a natural part of the next stage?
If there were a mapped hazard, it would be something that we would analyze at this stage. So in your project now, we would look at it, and that would be as it relates to particular circumstances. We did analyze and map the flood area. We consider that for its suitability. Since that's not mapped, we don't analyze it, or we acknowledge that it's not mapped. However, when it comes to site plan approval and actual construction, there are some engineering standards that will be triggered as well.
I have one question for Dustin. in regards to the consideration of the planning department and the planning commission, are there any standards by which you consider the possible negative effects of so-called speculative zoning? That's to say, if you did not believe that this was a viable project, et cetera, and it could have more negative effects, and it seems like it's being done for that purpose. Is there a way to evaluate that? Or is it purely not something that's considered?
Not really for feasibility. You know, if the speculation would be such that all of a sudden it introduces what could be a compatibility issue, we could evaluate that now. So say, for example, it became a light manufacturing zone that would maybe introduce permissible uses that would on their face be like incompatible, and then those would be entitled by right. That absolutely should be something that you evaluate now. I think what we look at is, you know, the intent and to develop this as housing, although driven and consistent by an intent to have more dense housing here, an increase in density, and at least the allowance of multifamily, putting conditions of approval within the development agreement, within the terms and conditions that make sure that we don't get outside of that intent, or at least narrow it to the point where residential next to residential is inherently not incompatible. Although it may be at different densities, I think we have the right and would advise you to make sure that we put the right sideboards on it, and you're entitled to do so at this time. So, for example, C2, the intent of this application is not to zone this C2 so that we can have a drive-through restaurant. It's very oriented towards the allowance for additional housing. So putting conditions on that zone change at the time of annexation is something you can do. And we do so in order to maintain this compatibility feature. So if there's things that you believe should be ruled out of what is permissible, we can entertain those.
And I suppose the tail end to that is if this zone change were to occur and transfer of ownership was entertained, would they be subject to the same conditions?
Yeah, we would have the terms and conditions of both the zone change and ordinance would run with the land. So the owner, developer, their successors and or assigned would be bound.
Thank you, Dustin.
Megan.
Thanks. Dustin, I guess really base question, but a lot of comments about this is, defining if this is or isn't speculation. And I guess I'm unclear. We don't do a lot of these. Like, is that part of the approval criteria that we need to determine it is or isn't, or is
No, that's not an approval criteria. I think, whether you evaluate each application on its own merits, depending on how specific and or not specific it is, there is no obligation to review this as speculative or non-speculative. So the ask is review the application on its own merits, whether it meets the criteria in 1708 and moves this in the public interest for all of its clarity and or ambiguity. That's the ask. If it needs additional clarification or points or sideboards, you absolutely are welcome to condition it on that. And that's one of the benefits of the annexation. You have much more conditioning power to narrow this in. I think we've heard from the applicant what some of their concerns are, where they're willing to go and maybe not go. But certainly you have the right to condition your action based on your comfort level and what you believe furthers the public interest and your goals.
Just want to make certain that I am reading this correctly. Under the, like the general requirements, if, for example, or for instance, if this is not able, to be developed, doesn't pencil out or whatever, we're still getting the trail easement, correct? Because it says, prior to the issuance of any.
So
question.
In your,
please, sorry. This is hard work. That's all. Thank you.
within your application, you have a condition of approval. This is number 6. It says prior to any demo permit, site development, construction license, or any access easement, or the access easement will be granted. So if they want to demo the house, they want to move dirt,
Gotcha.
if they want to get a business license, all that would be prerequisites to any action. Or the trail easement itself would be pre-required prior to that.
I will now close the public testimony portion of the hearing and bring it back to the council for deliberation and decision. I want to compliment the testifiers. That was well-organized, cogent, civic-minded, civic-spirited. Thank you all. It's not always how that goes. As you can tell, this is hard work. Good job. We're gonna take a 5-minute break and then come back and start to talk about it, and you all can obviously stay, or you don't, if you spoke and then you leave, it's not like we're gonna be like, oh, they don't care. So thank you very much. All right, who would like to start? Yeah.
Right. Before we start the deliberations, there's one important aspect that we may want to consider before we get into too much of this, and that's there's an ongoing negotiation between the applicant and the neighbors regarding a purchase of part of this property. So it would be, in my opinion, immature is the wrong word, but interfering in those negotiations between these two parties if we were to deliberate or render some decision on this or change the nature of their negotiations. So if we choose to do that, that's what we choose to do, but.
Dan and Dustin, do you have an opinion about that?
The possibility that the neighbors would purchase certainly the north half is very tempting. Having represented a lot of neighborhood groups in my career, if you wanted to end those negotiations, then you would deny or delay this rezone. The only reason they're talking is because it's on the verge of getting rezoned. So I think those negotiations would stop if this were denied.
What about delay?
Same thing.
You think the negotiations would stop if we were to delay our decision?
These negotiations can happen if you approve the zone change.
Thank you, Dan.
That's what makes it valuable. That's what makes it worth talking about purchasing.
Brandon, any follow-up on that?
My concern thus is then regarding that side of the property, the outcome of what we choose, whether we choose to rezone it or not, has a direct impact on their negotiating position. How much they choose to pay, how much they choose, whatever their terms are. So whatever in the rest of our deliberations, then keep that in mind.
Well, I guess actually counter to that, I feel like it's not our responsibility to decide what individual landowners negotiate or don't negotiate. We should be deciding what meets our criteria and what is in the best interest of the city at large. It feels super weird to say, oh, we want to favor or not favor these 1 or 40 people.
Okay. Mayor, it's okay if we have a discussion about this? Okay. That this is in effect in what we're doing and being asked to do on behalf of the applicant to engage in this zone change. Either way, no matter what we choose, we're either doing it on behalf of the applicant or we'll be doing it on behalf of apparently this neighborhood group. So we are being, whether we like it or not, put into a position in which we're making this decision. It's just a matter of who we're making this decision for at this point. That's my opinion about it. We may differ in opinion, and that's fine. That's only concern I may have.
Megan?
Yeah, I don't want to hash this out a lot, but I would counter from both cases, we should be making the decision in the best interest of the community at large, not either party.
I agree with that.
Mark. I'm very excited that we have a vehicle to get a trail easement, and I think that it has been forever, and we've had endless number of, oh, this deal is going to happen or that deal is going to happen. So the fact that this has the chance to be real is encouraging to me, and that's weighing a lot of what I say. For the south side, I think that with the conditions that are in this document, it's consistent with that little piece of neighborhood. I mean, it's just, simple ingress, egress, and some housing next to the Providence facility. I think that that's just being clever. And so the C2 zone with the conditions I support. For the multifamily on the north side, I really think that the fact that there's going to be a whole other development lap where the realities of buildability, the realities of whether it can or can't be done is really the catch-all. So I sort of struggled with, how do we insist on it being open space or not, but the fact that we have more wetland protections that being part of the city, and there's this huge, very public process to approve a development plan when there's a development plan. I think, so I am comfortable with the R3 multifamily zone for that. You know, that's the same zone that Adams Creek is. So, and I know that one pretty well. And do I have any other hands? So I support this as presented.
Thank you, Mark, for that as well, just to build upon that. Definitely some of the things that I'm considering here, you know, in terms of the goals of the city, upzoning in the interest of housing is definitely a goal. The transportation system plan in terms of the trail system, a goal. So, I think it was said earlier, it does line up with the goals of the city quite well, but don't want to leave it at that whenever making a determination like this. Definitely taking into consideration, the sort of speculative nature of this. This is our one tool, I feel, with annexation to be able to put conditions upon a property like this. And I don't see it becoming more valuable being that there's conditions that you have to build a certain type of thing there now, right? So it doesn't feel like it could be a bait and switch to a property buyer because there aren't these conditions put upon it. There's now a large easement. There would also be the protections of the wetlands that are included in there as well. So I think it makes it more of a defined property and less of a speculative C2 R3 property. It's something that I think the Parks Department had a huge, they tried very hard to make this happen. Others have tried to make this happen before. I don't think as people talk about, letting the process play out more and see if there's more options. If there were more options, I feel like they would have happened over the last many decades. In regards to things like, street width and runoff and, could this be a Trojan horse and everything, that's also something that I think is important to consider. I think in terms of the protections that we get with the conditions of annexation, that sort of ensures that there's no bait and switch, because we do have this entire process that comes after this. I was a planning commissioner. It's not easy to get something into the city. And if there were any exceptions or anything that would come later, those would have to be approved by the city or reviewed by the planning commission, et cetera. So there's an entire process and a lot more due diligence to be done in regards to the development. So just making sure I've got everything else laid out here. Yeah, because of that, other things that people said, I think are speculative in nature. I try not to consider anything for or against that's not, demonstratable. So I think that those are the list of sort of the arguments that I've heard on both sides. And because of that, I feel that it's in the best interest to let this proceed. Thanks.
Great. One thing I think we might want to tweak regarding the conditions if we choose to move forward with this is the timing of the trail, bringing that into city. One of the conditions is to do that upon getting a permit demo, correct? Just making sure. Is it possible to bring that forward to a term of at time of annexation instead, bring that forward in time? Change this condition to bring it forward.
That would be up to you all. I think we've talked about that. There might be issues of closing and completing the deal pending annexation. So I don't know if the owner and or current property owner would be amenable to that.
So it can't be dedicated until it's till the transaction closes.
So I want to kind of spin that out a little further for me. So like, we have two adults making an agreement between themselves. Either of them can say, yeah, no, I just, either can back out. And if we change the conditions of we get the trail a little bit sooner, we get the trail a little bit later, that could change the motivations of the parties and that could change the likelihood that they say, yeah, no, right?
Right.
Thank you. Thank you.
I guess jumping on Grant's a little bit of, I think time of sale makes sense, but is it possible to say, the current condition or within a year or two or what, whatever a set time is, whichever is sooner? And so that we don't have something of, okay, it turns out it doesn't pencil. Nothing actually happens. There's not either demo and we're still 10 years down the road and.
If you have a time, we could also entertain a time, like upon, within 120 days of closing, or like, it could be demo construction permit as listed, or within, within 30 days of closing.
Okay, I guess, I'm picturing that there might be some time needed to actually figure out where exactly the trail goes, given the fairly complicated, moisture topography aspects of it. So at 30 days seems too short, but it maybe having that as kind of a secondary aspect of the condition might.
Well, we could dial that in for your, so one of the conditions is that we complete an annexation agreement. That'll be some paperwork and documentation. If 4 of you were interested, I could model something that has not only the permit aspect, but some sort of time trigger to accommodate a.
Please, if I could just comment.
Just, the short answer is no.
To accommodate some sort of time.
Council, would we like to talk, we're sort of negotiating with an imagined person. Do we want to speak to the applicant? Doug?
Yeah, I think that would be beneficial. I'd also like to hear from Dustin. Why didn't you do that in the first place? Is there any history there? Did you try to get it upon annexation? Why would you arrive at this?
Yeah, I think typically if we would have had the applicant as owner, that would have been a different, the fact that there's some contractual arrangement here makes it a little more difficult. So the first thing is a construction permit. This is about the first thing that would happen prior to any development post closure.
30 days. Crazy.
So we were looking for a post closure, applicant would control the property, trigger.
Dan, is there something?
If you're thinking of rejiggering the condition, you should reopen the record and ask the applicant if that's a feasible condition or not.
Thank you. Mark.
I concur with what I think both Grant and Megan are saying, and it's, the concern is if something falls through in the planning stage, they'll do the easement. Assuming that everything's gonna go to plan and it's not gonna be a problem. But then we don't have a developer that says, well, I tried my best. No, you don't get a trail easement. So that's what we're trying to do.
I think I'm opposed to rejiggering because I don't know all the legalities, but it seems like if this deal falls apart because they start the demo and it's, there's 1 million miles of uranium or something. If something goes sideways with the project, we're not gonna get this. There's no way we're gonna get the trail because the sale will fall through.
If you take a hole, we have a trail. You don't.
Or if we require him to give us the trail before digging the hole, he may say, yeah, I'm going to Bozeman.
That's what it does now.
Yeah, good news is prior to the demolition and uranium find, there would be a demo permit and we would have the trail easement.
So demo permit is the trigger now.
It's any permit.
Any permit.
And that being listed as one. So there's an existing structure on the property now. Presume that existing structure is not for the long haul.
And we're sort of deliberating, perhaps we want to get the trail even sooner than demo permit. Is that the kind of Grant and then Doug?
I posed the question as a hypothetically, should a developer choose never to get a permit or just put it off indefinitely? Because that is not an assured thing. So if for the betterment of everyone in the city, if our intent is to dedicate this area and connect this trail as one thing, as one way to better everyone in the city, we expect that to be a deliverable. If we lose that deliverable, why would we agree? What's the point? So we need to have assurance that we can meet that deliverable. And with an indefinite, no date certain that there will be a permit pulled, there is no date certain that we will get a trail.
So the hypothetical, as I understand it, is he buys the piece of land, but he never does anything with it. It just sits there.
Mhm.
Does that seem likely to you? Like he spends the money, like how's that work? I don't get that.
That's where we are today.
You're not saying anything, you're looking at me like I'm stupid, but I'm.
No, it's what's happened for the last many decades. It
Well,
happens
for the last many
across-
decades, it's like the family sat on it and didn't sell it.
Yeah, there are many properties all over. I don't know the full intentions of people everywhere. People do things. They buy properties, they sell properties, they sit on properties, they do all sorts. There's tax shelters all over the place. Who knows why people do what they do? I am just trying to create a structure to ensure that if we agree to this and we say this is one of the deliverables that we expect out of this, we make sure we deliver on the things that we are going to deliver on.
I'm afraid that rejiggering will result in him walking and then we have no trail also.
I'm not trying to put a radical condition on this. There's timelines. We have a long-term time horizon, and we can, of course, reopen the record and ask the applicant if we wish, and Councilor Saunders has her hand up.
No, I'm good now.
Well, I guess to maybe get to this, Dan said we would, in order to answer this, we would reopen the record, ask the applicant. Is that also reopening the record for everyone, or is this a narrow open, get an answer, and we come back to deliberation?
If you, you're contemplating a condition, and so you need to see if it's feasible. If it changes the proposal, then you need to let the public comment on that as well.
Shall we try? Shall we narrowly reopen?
That's kind of a gray area, whether that would change the proposal or not. But if it's a close call, you have to let the public testify on a change to the proposal that comes up.
I don't know, I mean, I feel like it's an important thing for I'd like to hear what the applicant has to say. We're brokering a deal here, so I don't want to be unfair and run the risk that this all falls apart because of that. And similarly, if anybody in the public has something to say about that condition, that sways their opinion one way or another, has something to add to that, I think it's valuable. But certainly don't want to hear, I'm upset about what you're talking about or anything like that. If there's valuable insight into this change and maybe that sways someone's opinion, I'd like to hear that.
Thank you. Did anyone go? I mean, 4 votes makes a yes. I'd like to hear from the applicant also. How about a quick thumbs up, down? Do we have 4 people who'd be happy to hear from the applicant? Okay. Now, if you would approach, thank you.
So discussing the mechanism, again, I'm gonna be brutally transparent. When I approached Dustin with the idea that we wanted to get the trail through and how could we find a mechanism to do that, Dustin and I had many conversations about intentions, what were we trying to do, what were the mechanisms that would trigger the various things. We talked extensively about, even if this deal falls through, is there any way that we can get the city to trail? And the answer was no. There's no mechanism for us to force the Campbell Family Trust to give the trail to the city. If conditions were put on this project where we couldn't live with them and we walked, they probably will reject the annexation. It won't happen and you will not get the trail. We came up with an agreement that there's a derelict house with homeless people living in it. We've had to board the house up already. They're going to cause major problems for anybody who owns this property. And the best and first thing that needs to happen is the house has to come down. That's a very definable thing that happens that we request and the city grants, which is a permit to do something on the property. The other issue with speeding up that process is no one knows the route that the trail should take. The city, Dustin has said repeatedly, he's not 100% sure that the route that Mark had drawn is the appropriate route. Is it too expensive? Is it the right width? There's a lot of unknowns here. And if you put unnecessary restrictions on our ability to figure that out and say, now we have to all, instead of focusing on how to figure out how to do our developments and how to do all the other things that have to happen, we now have to focus on getting the trail figured out. I mean, you're just putting unnecessary requirements on us that we probably can't fulfill and are dependent on Parks and Rec, city performance, the surveyor, all these various people that, if we have 100 days, we probably will just walk, because I don't want that burden on me that, I also own a civil engineering company and I have lots of other things and I have 2 young kids. And like now I have to focus on trying to figure out what the alignment of the trail is for the perfect setup for the city. It's just not feasible. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mark, yeah, you may ask. Yes.
If the language is something like a floating easement, so you don't have to settle on a path, but it just says, I give Parks and Rec an easement that we'll both agree on over the next ever. Does that make a change? And it isn't the 100 days isn't what I'm hearing from anyone. It's sort of, if you decide to basically own it, but not do anything, that's we don't get a trail thing. So how do we do, and you're saying a little, trust me, I understand, but if we can word it with like a floating easement or something so that it doesn't affect your Gantt chart, but it ensures that we have a path within years, right? I mean, we've waited 30, we may as well wait 2 more.
So we would be open to something like that. I just don't think it's really feasible. The path that this thing is going to take is through extremely highly valuable wetlands that have been mapped. So DSL has stated, this is going to be an elevated pathway like you find across much parts of the Indian Creek Trail. There's no floating easement when you have to build an elevated path in order to give people the access that's required. So this thing has to be thought about. It has to be agreed upon by a whole bunch of stakeholders. Probably a lot of this community wants to have a say on exactly the route that it takes. It's just not feasible to build, a 600, I don't know how much it would cost to build a trail, but it's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's not a gravel path. This is an elevated walkway, boardwalk type trail. So again, we've run through a lot of these scenarios with Dustin and various people trying to figure out the mechanisms that make sense. And in the end, this is a big deal, and it shouldn't be something that should be forced through in 100 days. We've lasted 20 or 30 years without it. And I think another year while we work out the exact alignment, funding to build the trail, all the other mechanisms associated with it, it's already conditioned in the approval and the annexation that we have to give the trail. We are not in the business of buying a piece of land and letting it sit derelict. Was never the intention. That's not the goal. So at a minimum, the house has to come down at some point. It's a health hazard, it's a fire hazard, it's a major hazard. So that's an easy mechanism that has to happen at some point. So.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know, but no questions at this moment. So we reopened the door a crack and heard from him again. That seemed useful. We had a couple folks, I feel like I heard Doug and Mark saying Planning Commission did good work. We read the staff report, comfortable with where it's at. Seemed like Grant was positing a new wrinkle. Other comments?
I will, that was helpful in that it's very hard to imagine it's not actually owned by them now. And so I guess it was helpful to imagine though, like, well, yeah, that we just wouldn't do the annexation and rezone, or they'd reject it. I don't know what the right words are of, if it didn't get sold, this wouldn't go through, or does it still happen? How does that work?
In order to have your annexation agreement, which is conditioned, you need to have 2 agreeing parties. So I think if the applicant withdrew or didn't have a formal request, I don't believe the property owner would be willing to step up and pursue this. I think likelihood they would position themselves the same as they have in the past 40 years.
Yeah, so thank you. That's the correct language of but that was just a helpful reminder of, there isn't really any purpose of, you're going to bother to sign this. There is the incentive to at least do that first shovel pull. And then, what does or doesn't happen in the future. Feels like you at least have gotten that trail out of it. So that sequencing did make sense to me. big picture, yeah, you know, the annexation itself, I think is always, you know, somewhat the easier part. The zoning makes sense to me, given, especially the south side, given the uses of, you know, Down Manor and the sports club and like that whole area, it's already very built up. And I know some of it's not actually commercially zoned, but it is that kind of that multifamily, large, dense, very commercial feel. That makes sense to kind of extend a little bit to the west. Yeah, you know, I think most of the testimony was about the north. I understand that is a little harder. I think there's a whole lot of stuff, as both Mark and Doug touched on, that would need to be figured out prior to and during, you know, a land use application. I also am very sympathetic to like not wanting to go through what I imagine is a couple $100,000 of design and engineering and research to get there if it's a moot point. But I do think big picture, as we've worked on housing, as I've worked on housing for the last 8 years, the city's worked on it for longer, of we know we're not getting the build we need. We know most of our open land is R1 and that doesn't meet our needs, especially for high density multifamily type stuff. So I am supportive of us. If someone's actually asking for that, I'm supportive of us moving towards that. Knowing there's a lot of work ahead to make that actually work. I do have, and I think I'm gonna maybe wait on them a little bit because they feel it's slow, somewhat minor, but 2 questions on conditions, but that's there.
I want to understand that last 3 sentences. You're gonna wait on those questions until after this vote?
No, until other people have a chance to just kind of talk big picture, because they feel very nitty gritty.
Thank you. Gladys.
I haven't had the chance to speak, but I think I agree with a lot of the statements that have been made by my peers. And I respect the fact that our planning commission has supported this. And when I look at the 4 factors to consider, you know, back to the we need housing, and it's a great opportunity to do so. I think we can get really specific about the conditions that we want to see for this piece of property. Overall, I'm feeling that I'm in general support, and that I do want to thank everybody that has come out here to give testimony, whether that's for or against. Having all of your feedback is important to us, so please continue to do so. And that there's still, like Megan said, there's still a lot of work to do, a lot of plans that are going to be designed, that there will still continue to be an opportunity for folks to continue giving feedback to us as those decisions are being made.
Yeah, I'm generally in support of this. You know, I would obviously like to have the trail easement in earlier, but I think this is a really unique opportunity here to work on some things that the city really needs. You know, I remember reporting on, you know, talking to Lori Stern back like, you know, 10 years ago about her frustrations of not having that connection, and looking at that, you know, that dead end and being frustrated because you're so close. You're like, you know, what, 1,200 feet away or something like that. You know, we have a lot of people that talk about with growth in the community and issues with that, and I understand, but this would create this would be huge for the city to have that connection, to have that green belt that's going to continue on into the, you know, into the west side, and you know, have kids having a safe pathway to school, or you know, have more enjoyment for the community. When I got on, you know, got on council, you know, I said one of the things that I would want to do is do the greatest good for the greatest number of people. And I think that this helps do that. You know, and I haven't gotten to like the housing component, and I understand people's concerns about what people consider nebulous language regarding what we call housing, especially when the unaffordability crisis in Hood River gets worse, and it feels like nothing is ever workforce housing or affordable housing. I get that. Those are real concerns. I have those too. But, you know, I think this is a lot of what we need. It's mixed use. It's high density. You're an area, as Megan mentioned, the Brookside Manor. You know, it's near shopping, and then having a trail to connect to all of that, like. That talks about a lot of the things that we have wanted. And I know that other people brought up, well, you know, there's better sites, Yes, absolutely. But things are not happening there. We've had a number of things come up. When I was planning commissioner, number of things have come up, and, you know, a lot of times they, you know, don't work out. Maybe this, you know, well, like things do happen. I understand that concern, but we've got a tremendous opportunity here, and I am not going to waste it. I am in support of this.
I think we're ready for your nitty gritties, Megan.
Thank you. So the first one, page 47 of the packet, you know, the condition about 50% or no less than 10 units. This is very legalese, Dustin and Dan, but if the way it's phrased, if they decided to not do housing units and did something else that was allowed in the C2 zone, would this still be triggered?
Yeah, I think the intent is to mandate a residential component and not have this not be residential.
Right.
So,
Well, I mean, I know that's the intent. I guess I just
Yeah.
want, like, can you guys look at that with the lens of
you bet.
if, and again, I apologize to the applicant if I keep doing this speculation of everything's falling apart.
Housing is required.
But if that were to happen,
zone.
are we,
And it.
has this met what I think you and council is aiming for?
The less of it shall be.
So I guess if there's four of you, we could wordsmith it just to make sure it's crystal clear that if the statement, and again, four is a yes, that housing is required on the C2 portion. Like we could preface that as just simply and this.
I like being very clear about.
Okay, I think that makes it even more crystal clear.
So I want to understand, Dustin is proposing adding about 3 words, which is housing is required on the C2 portion. Anybody got heartburn about that? Adding those
In condition
words
7.
to this section? Everybody okay? Yeah, proceed with that.
Got it.
Thank you. And then my other one, and this is weird because this hasn't really come up in my 8 years, but we've never really had this like right at the urban growth boundary. The other side of the street is this, you know, EFU active orchard. And I'm just kind of wondering, and I think this is really minor, but I don't want to create an issue where there's some like extra conflict, which I know has occurred out in the county. And I know the county has language for folks that buy in the county. That's kind of a like, hey, I acknowledge I'm in an agricultural area and there might be smells and there might be noise and.
That's driven by a statute.
Okay.
When you put a non-farm use in a farm zone.
Okay. And so there's nothing we need to do or worry about.
It's just a statute
in
that
this.
only applies to
I know there's a
EFU.
boundary there. I know it's different jurisdictions.
I think it's a right to farm easement.
Okay.
And it basically waives your right to sue a farmer for customary farm practices such as spraying, dynamite, whatever is required to plant a tree and or scare the ducks away. I live near Northrop.
Okay, but I mean, I guess from your, is that even relevant if it's city versus, I mean, like, I know they're completely different jurisdictions and I don't want to create an extra mess, but it just like, when we've done annexations in the past, it's definitely been annexation of stuff that's like well within the UGB and not kind of right on that line. And so it just felt slightly different.
Right. I think to include a condition like that here, and the buffer will be the right of way width.
The road, actually.
Yeah, the right of way width is going to be the buffer. You would be to include a condition like that here would basically allow the ag user to permit, for example, pesticide drift into a residential neighborhood. And the condition you're contemplating would waive their right to complain about the nuisance, which you might want to think about. In a farm zone, state law says you acknowledge and waive that right to bring a nuisance complaint because you have moved into a EFU zone. And that doesn't apply here. And it has to do primarily with, well, the big thing is pesticide drift, but anything that could drift over, including noise.
And pesticide drift should be managed by a number of other agencies at this point.
Is that something the council should think about just in general? I mean, we already have it around Belmont.
Sort of like plain English is like, hey, yo, you're buying across the street from the county. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what this looks like. It just felt like a weird
It is different.
thing.
It's an external boundary, not an internal boundary.
Right. Well, under the context of the statute, those are all farm uses that are allowed in that zone. And so you move there, they're allowed to be there, whereas this isn't an EFU zone.
Seems like we're not making a change on this one.
Yeah, I think that was just right here.
I mean, we're not making a change, but I feel like that's something that I would like to better understand at some point, and I'm not sure if right now would be the time to do so. I don't know what other entities are involved when it comes to pesticides, but that's a public health concern. But again, I don't understand the legalities around that, just that would be concerning of there's pesticides going into this multifamily neighborhood and that we're just supposed to be okay with that?
No, if you move to a farm zone, you waive your right to bring a nuisance complaint against that. That doesn't exist here. I'm not suggesting you force the future property owners here to waive their right for pesticide drift coming out of the EFU zone into the city C2 zone. So I'm not suggesting that.
Feels like we're nearing violent agreement on that. Is there anything somebody wants to say? Can we make a motion? And I'm not going, Keanu Reeves the bus here, I'm just asking.
No, I think we're maybe, this is to prepare an ordinance, so I think we're trying to understand the right language to proceed. Is there a suggested motion here?
If you're looking to approve the matter, it would be approved with conditions and authorize staff to draft ordinances for annexation and zone change.
It mentioned the change to conditions 6 or 7.
Frankly, that's a hard motion for me to memorize.
Sorry.
If you want to say it, somebody could say so moved.
So to reaffirm, if a motion to approve would be a motion to approve subject to amended
As
conditions.
recommended
As recommended.
by the staff report.
Are you reading?
He's making it up.
I'm making it up. And to authorize staff to draft annexation agreement, annexation and zone change ordinances.
If somebody says so moved, then it would work.
So, yep, with the modification of condition 7 is included.
So moved.
Who was that? Moved by Stepina. Do we have a second? Second.
Okay.
Second by Mitchell. Okay. So, I mean, I don't want to be, lackadaisical, but that was a lot of precise words that I have great faith Dustin got right.
We got it recorded.
Captured the concept of what we're here talking about tonight. Further discussion on this matter. I call the question. All in favor?
Yeah.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Chair votes aye, motion passed. Thanks, everybody. Wow.
And we'll bring this back at the next meeting.
I don't know. I mean, however long it takes to wrap it up. There's gonna be some, I would like to do some work on the annexation agreement, but I think we could just do that. There's some typical stuff that comes out of it.
So if you exhibit to the ordinance.
Yeah, and they'll sign it. They'll sign it. But I think there's some nuance that you can put in that, that's gonna be more like. It's easier for us to just deal with that. Air it out.
I got it.
Right, I get that, but I just trying to figure out what all we have to get done before it can come back. Oh, and can we be certain about when it comes back?
2025.
Okay. Where we are. Yes, I see a lot of my clients that, I've represented an opponent.
And you will be removed. I would entertain a motion to approve the remainder of the consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda without item 2.
Moved by Saunders,
Second.
second by Stepina. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye. The consent agenda as amended passes. Item number 2, Gladys.
I will abstain from OLCC permit application approvals. This is not a reflection of these establishments or the business or their owners. Rather, I object the fact that we don't have enough transportation options for people who visit these establishments. As a result, they may end up getting behind the wheel and putting themselves and others at risk. If we and our countywide partners are able to provide adequate transportation during late evenings and weekends, I will be happy to start approving OLCC applications again.
I would entertain a motion to approve item number 2.
I move we approve OLCC permit application for the Trillium Cafe.
Moved by Saunders,
Second.
second by Stepina. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Boom. Action items. Wastewater. Thanks for waiting, you guys.
Blue M&Ms.
You can have
All right, Adam, what do you got, man?
All right, good evening, Mayor and Councilors. Adam Schmidt, Public Works Director of the City of Hood River. On page 46, you will find the wastewater treatment plant contract. As most of you know, Jacobs has been involved with the wastewater treatment plant for over 30 years. They've been managing the plant. I've had the opportunity for over 20 years to work in a small capacity with a wastewater treatment plant up until a couple of years ago. With my new role, I've spent quite a bit of time, worked very closely with the managers along with the industrial pretreatment compliance team. In that time, it's become very evident to me that the Jacobs team takes pride in the plant. In the last year, city staff, including Haley, Chris, Abigail, Dan, have been working with Jacobs to finalize a long-term contract. The proposed contract is for 15 years. There's two notable things in this contract. One of them is the mercury minimization plan, and the other one is drafting a fat, oil, and grease program. And I will say that this last month, I had the opportunity to join DEQ on a compliance inspection at the plant. This is a very deep dive into how the plant's being managed, and happy to say there were zero deficiencies with the inspection. city looks forward to working with the team, move forward with our plans with the capital facilities plan that's going to be coming out at the end of the month. So looking forward to making updates in the future down there. With that, that's all I have. If anybody has any questions.
Thank you. Questions for staff? Good job, everybody. I used to work at the homeless shelter some as a volunteer, and joking, not joking, I would be like, if we run out of coffee or toilet paper, we are in a crisis. And you guys provide the services to the city that are essential and necessary, and people don't want to know about or think about, and good job.
Thank you. Before we look, I'd like to allow
Where the
all the
puppy
way
goes.
2.5 hours to say something. I'd like Paul to say something. Now, okay, 15 minutes.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate it. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. Paul Real. I'm the Executive Director of Operations for Jacobs for the West Region. Thrilled to be here. Actually, I haven't spent 2.5 hours in a room with these people in a while, so we caught up on all of our personal lives tonight. So that was actually pretty nice. But thank you for being here tonight, for renewing our contract with us. This is the longest running contract we have in Jacobs as a city of the river. So right behind you is Twin Falls, Idaho, and a few others, but this is the longest. So our partnership's been great. We really appreciate it. I want to thank Adam, Abigail, also Will. I remember working with Will a couple of years ago, Haley, all those who worked with us on the contract. I'm sorry if I missed any other names, but really appreciate it. And once again, thank you so much for this opportunity. Look forward to the next 15 years.
Great.
Thank you.
So this is an action item. Questions or a motion?
I move that we authorize the city manager to sign the amended and restated agreement for wastewater facilities operations, maintenance and management services with OMI Inc. Jacobs.
Moved by Paulson,
Second.
second by Rivera. Discussion. How many plants do you do or cities do you do?
In the west, I've got 44 under me, and in the east, I think we're over 50. So we're close to 100 municipal facilities. We also do private industry as well.
Okay.
In the US, the
Thanks.
Western Canadian facilities too.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Opposed? Chair votes aye. Congratulations, staff and Jacobs. Thanks for getting it done.
Thanks so much, you guys. It's super important. Yeah.
Significant industrial user surcharging. Also super important.
All right, this is surcharging for the significant industrial users. This is adopting resolution 2024-25. This goes back to 2021 when the city started adopting the industrial pretreatment program. There was a mistake in the billing when this was adopted in May of 2023. So the city kind of backed away at the time with the previous surcharging schedule. We had Wayne Heineman with Jacobs. He came back out, reevaluated the break-even cost for treating the waste going into the wastewater treatment plant. At that time, we had met with all 4 of the SIUs. It was determined by staff shortly after that the fees associated with the newly updated schedule were significantly higher than what were shown to the SIUs back in 2023. So this resolution is a phased in approach to the surcharging fee schedule. This would be a 25% increase in January 1 of 2025. And then another 25% increase July 1, 2025, with the final increase being a year later in July 1 of 2026. Are there any questions regarding the SIU surcharging resolution?
I understand there's some sort of political spoonful of sugar aspects to this scheduling and whatnot. It's hard when there's things get out of sync and you realize, oh golly, we got to catch up and how quick to catch up. And so certainly there's judgment calls being made there. Any comments or questions for Adam on this? Mark, go ahead.
So could you, I remember the debate, but I remember, the few companies that are affected for this first step. But can you remind us who, how many different pretreatments there are, and have they been retold this, and okay, it's really here and stuff. How did that go?
Absolutely. Thanks for the question. Yeah, so there's 4 total significant industrial users. We have Frame, Ryan's Juice, Turtle Island, and Full Sail. And about 2 months ago, when Wayne came out, we met individually with all 4 SIUs. That was when the first initial break-even cost fee schedule was presented. And it was after conversating with those individual SIUs that we felt it was necessary to take this phased approach. And so I met individually with all of the SIUs since then, had conversations with them about this phased in schedule. And I will say those meetings went well.
Yeah, I actually was going to ask the same question, just so you had an opportunity to speak about it. You and I had an opportunity to speak, and it sounded like you had some really good conversations. I just want to thank all the significant industrial users for participating in the feedback and whatnot. So, and thanks for spearheading that.
I mean, I also want to flag, it was in the report, but that we're doing this phase in, and as we're phasing it in, you're already planning for some, the cost of living increase type things in it. And so I feel like hopefully we're not going to be going backwards as we do this. So I thought we haven't seen that as we've done some phase in with some of these other fees and stuff we've been talking about in the last year or two. And so I think that was a nice way to kind of say, okay, we're, making this a little easier, which I think is valid because there's some major increases in there, but also acknowledging we need to cover those costs. So there's a good balance.
Motion.
I move to adopt resolution 2024-25, establishing a new base rate and implementing a surcharge rate for significant industrial users to be included into the adopted consolidated schedule of city fees, rates, and charges for services.
Moved by Stupino,
Second.
second by Saunders. Perhaps for the last time. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion passes. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Jacob. City recorder. Wait, did I do something wrong?
Oh, no, never mind.
City recorder. I'm open to that. Certainly, it's 9 o'clock.
Your
You got an
Honor,
ordinance for us?
yeah, Your Honor, I'd like to entertain a first, possibly second final reading of ordinance 2086 by title only with the amendment mentioned earlier.
I would say because we are 7, we could do it first and second reading if we wish.
Yeah.
So somebody make that motion.
I move we read ordinance 2086, sign code chapter 18 for the first and second time by title only with the minor amendment.
Moved by Saunders.
Second.
Second by Stupino. Discussion. Roll call.
Counselor Polson.
Aye.
Counselor Rivera.
Yes.
Counselor Sapina.
Aye.
Counselor Saunders.
Yes.
Counselor Mitchell.
Aye.
Counselor Zan Miller.
Yes.
Your Honor.
Aye.
Ordinance 2086, an ordinance amending Title 18, signs and related regulations, Chapter 18.02, sign code, Section 18.02.120, prohibited signs of the Hood River Municipal Code to clarify and prohibit feathered signs and similar signs supported by a pole and designed to flutter in the wind.
Ordinance 2086 has passed its first and second readings by total only and will take effect in 30 days. Abigail.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. First of all, I'd like to say my thanks to Adam and Haley. The two items that you just approved have been in the works for years. And I'm so pleased that the SIU piece, this was the final chapter of that. And the Jacobs contract had been extended, year or 2 years, a year, multiple times. And I'm just really pleased to see that finish this year. So my thanks to both of them and all city staff and to you for seeing those through to completion. I appreciate it. I have two pieces of good news for you. Let me find the details here. The first is, and I'm glad that Haley is in the room in case you have questions. The city has been approved for the ODOT Carbon Reduction Program. This is a grant that we asked you to allow us to apply for that would allow for the purchase of light-duty electric vehicles. The grant award is approximately $240,000, requires a $27,000 match, which I believe we already have budgeted. And we'll bring more details to you in January or February, but great news on that one. And then
Like 4 vehicles over a couple of years.
I believe is that right? It's 4 vehicles? Haley?
3 out of 4.
Sorry, okay, thank you.
Right. So we have one of them as the match. And the second grant is, you might remember, Megan Ramey had encouraged us to apply and you agreed for the city Threads grant, which would allow us to create an implementation plan for the Safe Routes to School project. And that has also been approved. So very good news on both those fronts. And then just a personal comment to Councillor Saunders and Councillor Zan Miller. I've so greatly appreciated working with you and we'll miss you and wish you the very best. And before we leave today, we have items to present to you.
Thank you. Glass, you have a question?
Remind me the amount for the City Threads grant.
I don't have it in front of me. I know we had a $15,000 match and I think it was in the neighborhood of about 50,000.
Abigail, when should we do the gift giving? Did you think that would?
I think if we want to do that after you all make comments and before you adjourn. We do that as piece.
Very last.
Great. And I want
Very
to,
last and very not least.
and grab some photos.
Great.
Thank you.
Other city manager comments?
That's it.
The mayor has to talk about a planning commission appointment. Dustin.
Thank you, Mayor. We maintain an open call for applications. Currently, you have 2 vacancies at Planning Commission. We received 1 application. Councilor Stepina and I conducted an interview on your behalf. The applicant, Tina McNearty, was the one applicant who applied. We still have 1 vacancy. You have a recommendation to appoint. As a suggested motion, you may choose to interview or to maintain applications open. That's
I
what
remember the process. Is this a mayor appointment or a council appointment?
Mayor with council support.
You guys support me in appointing? All right, I appoint.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayor comments, just the shape of the landscape, like there's 5 Mondays in December. And we don't meet Christmas week. So we're gonna see y'all like in 2025, just saying. May everybody have holidays if you celebrate, or whatever, however we say that these days. On a personal note, this will be my first Christmas in 35 years celebrating by myself. So that's a thing. Council comments, Ben.
All right. I keep together here. Nope, not working. Somebody else go first.
All right, Doug.
Start with the easy one. Tree lighting and everything that happened just recently. Was really glad that so much of us could attend together. I think we should try to do that again next year, even though we don't have a work plan session prior to that. I think it's helped support the mayor, and it's a tough job to do up there, and really appreciate you doing that. You got it done without much technical difficulties or, rabble in the crowd. It was a lot smoother this year, so congratulations on that. The not so easy thing, saying goodbye to a couple friends and colleagues. Start with Mark. We've been remarking for some time now how it'll be Gladys and then Grant and I in terms of the seniority here. So, but know that you're not turning into a pumpkin, though maybe a pumpkin abroad every once in a while and whatnot. But I've just really enjoyed working with you. I've learned so much from you. It's tough. Like once we started to get into this first election cycle, where I was on council, and very happy to be working with Anna and with Amanda. just what a vested interest you have in the colleagues. And especially after this week, and this applies to both of you, of course, just, how we shouldn't take that for granted. So, personally, just enjoyed all the conversations we had, the chat over a beer, over city policy, and just, getting to know you. And, I won't say I'll miss you a lot because I'll still see you around. Maybe the golf course sometime and whatnot. I know your golf partner and the guy that sells you the tea or whatever, however you say that. Thank you, Mark. And yeah, thanks so much for running the URAB as well, and facilitating that. I can tell from when Megan has had to, and for Paul tonight, facilitating is not an easy thing in anything that we do with this. So thank you for that as well. And Megan, put simply, is probably the reason that I did this at all. So, so that's tough. But thank you for encouraging. I've been doing a lot of that too, whether it be planning commission or committees. It's a tough decision to do this. It takes up so much of your time, and people say, how do you have free time? A lot of us don't have free time because we do this. And just seeing you be a counselor, huge inspiration. It's the reason why I did it. Yeah.
That's really mean to ask me to speak now. Well, I had two really minor actual council things. Which is very hard to adjust back to, but I did, there was the State of the Watershed talk, which Abigail was a featured speaker at last week, and I did attend it, and she did really good and got everyone in the audience really excited about our wastewater treatment plant and not flushing the flushable wipes and not putting fog down the drain, and it was just a real joy to watch. So I did just want to give her a real shout out there. And then no actual action, nothing really exciting, but I did connect with the water person at League of Oregon Cities and kind of chat about some of the water things we've been talking about. Some of it also is, my day job stuff, but it was just kind of a nice talk that I'm hoping to loop. And I know him and Abigail have talked in the past, but kind of loop that back around, especially as I'm stepping out, because I think that's just going to be important in the long term. And then I did just, both this current council, past council, current city staff, past staff, the last 8 years has just been like really amazing. Such an honor, sometimes really hard work, but with such good colleagues and the ability to get humor out of not the hardest bits, but some of the hard parts has been really great. And I'm sorry to be going. I mean, I'm excited for parts of my personal life, but I really look forward to overlapping with you all in new ways in the future and still supporting you. And I'm always happy to talk about council or talk about not council if you need a beer and a break. But yeah, it's been great. So thank you.
So, couple silly things first, maybe. I did some quick simple math on the way down, and I've walked to city council meetings over 300 times. What a lucky boy I am, and that's for sure. I woke up Sunday morning going, I forgot to put a Post-it note on that board in our discussion on Saturday. So I sent Abigail and Paul an email saying, hey, you should add this thing. So I do promise to not do that regularly. I won't. And you all are welcome to tell me to shut up. You're not on council anymore. I feel so lucky to have been able to do this, and that no one ever caught on to me being unable to do it well. So you guys as coworkers really, or family really, and, you know, all the councils before and staff, you're just so wonderful and you work so hard and it's been a real joy and I'm sad to leave it, but it's the right thing for Mark right now and it has nothing, you know, I'd keep going forever if it was just up to me. So you should all be thankful for that too. Eh, Just thanks. Thanks. It's wonderful.
Well, I had a lot of things to say, so I'll say them at the next one. Yeah, Mark and Megan, you both have been with me since the very beginning, since I joined council, and I didn't always have the easiest time. And so I appreciate you both just giving me a space where I felt safe, comfortable, and helped me learn when I started, you know, COVID took over and I didn't get to have some of these, you know, one-on-ones that some of my other peers have had the opportunity to do. So just thank you for helping to educate, to empower me to be here. Megan, I've always appreciated the other lady on the side, right? To amplify me at times, and similar to you, Mark, I know that I can get all wound up about things, and Mark, you've been really good about helping me be realistic of like what we truly have capacity to do, and so I appreciate that. I'm gonna miss you both being here. Like, who am I gonna bug on my left side? Now it's just you, Paul. Yeah, just really grateful for your time, for your energy, and for your commitment that you guys love Hood River so much that you've given so much of your time to be here to make better policies for all of us and just a better community overall. So thank you, appreciate you, and I know where you both live, so I'll see you soon.
Thanks. We'll see. I don't know. Jen might move around where we all sit. A couple quick things. Had the Region 1 Act meeting. Will and I are going to get together on the Region 1 Act wanted to interview us regarding interjurisdictional transfers. Will and I are going to do that. Just want to touch that really quick before we get to the SACI stuff. Appreciate both of you, serving with both of you. Learned a great deal from both of you. I appreciate going through and having these fulsome discussion with you and deciding important, long-lasting things that affect our community for decades. Recently, over the last couple of years, this was the Heights Resave Plan, the West Side Urban Renewal Zone, and tonight, with a decision that may actually connect the Indian Creek Trail, which has been a issue that's confounded this community for decades. Hopefully, we actually get it done and actually connect it and create a pathway for everyone to enjoy for decades to come, from little kids up to elderly folks enjoying this great community that we all appreciate. And we can continue this work for decades to come. Cutting it short for everybody watching at home as well. Just thank you for taking the time out to serve the community.
Anything else before? Yeah, Ben, excuse me.
Yeah, I got my crap together now. Anybody couldn't tell during the annexation part, I am an emotional person, and sometimes that shines through, and it certainly will now. Well, first, Mark, it's, you know, only a brief time, but it's been nice serving with you. Known you for a while, and we really miss your institutional knowledge. Sometimes, like, as being a new person here, sometimes that terrifies me. Losing that. I know you're still around, but it's not the same. And Megan, I'm gonna miss you a lot. You're the person who I have known person who have known the longest in Hood River. And you are the reason that I am here on council. I wish that, you know, I wish that people knew in the community truly how much effort you put in this and how much you really care about this city. seeing you elected in 2016, especially, was a very nice thing to see with everything else that was going on. And I remember just being like, couldn't believe it, just like super inspired that a good friend of mine like did that and was willing to put herself out there. And I know it's not been easy. You've been here for a lot of some really contentious stuff and you've done the hard work. And you're an inspiration. I'm gonna miss that.
So is there anything to do before we get to the mushy stuff? All right, I'm coming up.
All right. So Mayor, we have 2 keys to the city for you to present. Oh gosh, I didn't think about the fact that folks would be a little bit of a mess when you did this part, so we're gonna take photos. But if you want to make comments and then we'll pause for photos, and then I think we can probably adjourn the meeting and then do extra photos after that.
Great. All right, so if Mark and Megan, please. 2 decades of service between you guys. The keys to the city of Hood River presented to Megan Saunders for faithful and dedicated service to the city and community. Hood River City Council 2017-2024. Wow. The key to the city of Hood River presented to Mark Zanmiller for faithful and dedicated service to the city and the community. Hood River City Council 2013-2024. Well, can we get the thing, Abigail? Or did you
Yes.
just take that picture?
Well, I just took a very quick photo, but I also want to share that not everybody wants to put a key on their wall or keep it handy nearby. And so we also have just some more functional pieces of art that are from Hood River, from a local artist, in hopes that you can use that every day and remember us and appreciate the work that you have done.
Fishy.
And I'd say, and this is.
Oh, and they're a little different fishy.
And this is a tradition we started with Kate McBride, Eric Haney, and Jessica Meta, so from the same artist. So I like that idea that we have a continuation of artwork through our counselors. And maybe when you visit each other's homes, you will see these and know that they were, you know, that they're kind of a symbol of your service in our city.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
that
I think we are done with all official business.
we are adjourned.
Thank you all.